Now, Laura, I did think about the intro music.
I was gonna say it was reminiscent
So,
of the movies one.
if you'd like to, hold on, let me get this right. Ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary pals, please give a warm welcome to our guests and friends on today's wonderful episode of Creative Recharge. Joining us today is Laura Nettles.
Why, hello.
And you know him. I love him. He's my technical producer and brother. It's Tom. Woo! There we go. And me.
The amazing glory.
I really love that piece of music that you found, Tom.
So
it
much
just
fun.
Has this fun little jazzy jive. It's just wonderful. It's called Piano Store, by the way.
Oh.
So I feel like this is what you play to sell a piano. And I'm like,
it'll jazz up your life.
Bump, 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 bum, 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 bum. So, here we are. Megan is here. Hello, sweetie. I'm so glad you're ready for it. We are too. Tom's ready to get the party started. Spence says, hello, little duckies. Quack, quack, baby. Quack, quack. And hello, cool gamer. And hello, Laura and Tom.
Quack, quack, Mr. Ducksworth.
So, literally right before we went live, I was saying something like, let's do it. We could do it. And Tom goes, let's lay an egg. And Laura Jen then went, what? So I was like, okay, we're going to go live. And then I will sing this song from Sesame Street. So it is, oh, hello, sweet prince.
Oh.
Look at that little
Your treat.
Yes, I do. Thank you so much. I got to go. But yeah, it's a parody on a Cole Porter song. It's birds do it, bees do it, even alligators in trees do it. Let's do it. Let's lay an egg. And essentially, it's a whole song about all these different, really diverse creatures that lay eggs.
Interesting.
It is a cute little Sesame Street parody. Highly recommend. I love it anytime you can take a Cole Porter song and make it informational.
I mean, that's a good parody.
Mm-hmm. Let's lay an egg. I mean, it's got some like layers of double and triple entendres there. It's layered. Yeah. It's got layers. So here we are today. Megan says the only Sesame Street song that stuck with me is "Don't Waste Water, Water, Water." Yes, he wasted water. He's an icky poo. I remember that one.
All that makes me think of is like, isn't there a game about don't waste water with an alligator? This little Android game.
I don't know. I don't think it's from Sesame Street.
No, although I think it may have been advertised and done through PBS.
But yeah, like I'm a Sesame Street kid. My mother raised me firmly on the street.
She'd turn on Sesame Street and then go wake us up. Because it was less fighting.
Uh-huh. I liked Barney as a kid, and my mom put up with it.
Yeah, Barney is a hard sell.
I didn't mind Barney too much, but then for some reason, Eureka's Castle, I couldn't handle it. Nothing about that show. No. Had to go.
I mean, I'm glad like so many kids love Barney. Our little sister loved Barney.
I remember like nothing of it. All I know is I had a Lamb Chop doll, hand puppet.
I loved Lamb Chop.
Was Lamb Chop on Barney, or did they have their own show?
No, it played back to back on PBS.
Oh, okay.
Lamb Chop was like a decade or two older than Barney.
Well, technically, Lamb Chop's like 40 years older than Barney.
True.
Lamb Chop did vaudeville, y'all. Like,
Wow.
Lamb Chop commented on the strippers.
Yeah.
I am not exaggerating. Lamb Chop originally started blue and went clean as she got older. Like, oh my god, Lamb Chop has a very interesting history. But yes, I loved the PBS Lamb Chop show. Get your teddy ready, though he may be sleeping on your bed. He should be in your lock and steady, gotten ready. Like I said, he should be gotten ready. Hold your teddy bear steady for a teddy bear tail. Hold his tail. You're welcome. You're welcome. Hold your applause. It's like my sister bugged a kid on the playground to steal his Barney doll. Oh my god. To give to me. She claims she just found it there and mom backs her up, but I don't believe either of them. Aw, that's sweet though.
Oh.
And mom popped to the store once when I was 4, literally next door, and came back to me bawling my eyes out on the couch watching Barney. And when she asked what was wrong, all I could say was, I just love Barney so much.
I think you're at that point you have reached this is addiction.
Right?
More religious fervor, take your pick. It's the
I
same
liked
parts of the brain.
Barney till they got rid of the older sister.
Yeah.
Once they got rid of her, it like really went downhill in my opinion. But I mean, like, not like, you know, negative about anyone else who still loved Barney even after that. It's just for me, I liked the older sister when they got rid of her because she was developing. It's like, what does it matter? Because she was still in middle school.
Yeah, she was a lot like Jennifer Connelly on that one.
Yeah.
You already got your treat.
But yeah, once they got rid of the older sister and kept the younger sister for like another year or two, it was like, hard pass. That was just for me personally.
I don't remember any of the characters except for
Also,
Barney.
was not thrilled when found out that it turns out they may not have gotten rid of the older sister because she was developing. They may have gotten rid of her because she accused the guy in the Barney suit of touching her inappropriately multiple times, and then he kept touching more children.
I did hear about that.
Yeah.
On to today's subject, horror.
It's in every facet of life.
Yes.
Which it is. So, okay. So, all right. So here's the pitch for today's subject, horror shorts. We're going to talk about 3 short films. They are all linked down below. If you haven't watched them, we would really love for you to watch them first. But may I recommend you watch them even on like 1.5 or double time and come back and then join in the discussion. But even if you don't watch them, you'll probably still have things to pipe in about this, because we are going to talk about the short film specifically, but then we are going to talk about what that means for writers, how they can apply what they've learned or observed in these short films, how they can apply to their own writing. And also, you know, let's be honest, the short films, some of them make a few mistakes storytelling wise. And we're going to talk about that and avoiding those issues. Like how do you know when, you know, one of the things about writing is it's very much a know when to hold them and when to fold them, when to walk away, when to run. It's like there's nuance to writing. So that can be kind of intimidating for people. And that's why we keep talking about this. So the thing I like about the short films is they really do have a direct analog to writing short stories. And I really do believe that writing short stories can help writers hone their writing craft a lot faster than trying to write novel length. Not that there's anything wrong with writing novel length. And especially if you want to write longer form stories, that is awesome. But like when you want to practice certain tropes or, you know, just to get a premise out of your system, short stories are a really wonderful way to do that. So that's why we're talking about short films, is because they connect so easily to the concept of writing short stories, which, you know, technically right now people are interpreting as anything under like 5,000 words. I gotta be honest, the whole idea of length of story is ever changing. What is a story length? What is a novel length? What is flash fiction? Flash fiction was not always called flash fiction. I don't know if y'all know this. And there has been an interesting inflation in the concept of what is a short story. When I was growing up, hello, sweet baby. When I was growing up, it wasn't a short story unless it was at least 500 words long, but it wasn't a short story if it was over 7,000 words. Then it was like a novelette or a novella. And these numbers have all kind of moved around and changed. And, you know, Laura introduced me to the word drabble. Is it drabble or drapple?
Drabble with bees.
Drabble.
Yeah.
There is a podcast just called Drabblecast.
And we used to just call those like story bites for a while. Those were called like little bites. Way back, how long ago? The 90s, y'all. The 90s. The previous century. That's when we called them story bites. So, like, all of these kind of concepts of what is it, don't sweat it. Unless you're trying to meet, like, some sort of
anthology submission word count.
I was like, all I could think of was the word anthology, and I'm like, I don't know, a way to, like, give your story to somebody else to possibly publish.
Yes. There are a lot of places that look for horror drabbles, which are exactly 100-word length stories. Like Black Hair Press does a drabble every single month to different themes. So those are fun. I write micro horrors as well, which are just around a drabble length. So like 30 words, I don't know, 50 words. Some of them even went to like 120.
So long.
I know. And then
I'll never finish that story.
There's an anthology I submitted to that wanted macro micro. So 150 to 360 words. So yeah, there's an audience for many different lengths.
There really is. So, like, that is why I still think it is a important thing to, like, at least, no matter what kind of writer you want to be, to also be working on being able to write stories of various lengths. Just so, number one, you have it under your belt. Number two, it is a wonderful way to hone your craft. And number three, it does make you more versatile for submission, should you want to do that. Even if you right now don't know that you want to do it, it ain't gonna hurt to practice.
Yeah. So the first thing I wrote was a novel. And I got through a couple of drafts of that. And then I read this writing craft book called The Anatomy of Prose by Sasha Black. And she's like, as an experiment, try writing a flash fiction and implement these certain types of techniques that you've been reading about. I was like, flash fiction? What? So I tried it, and my brain was like, I love this. I love it so much. I can reiterate over and over. I don't have to wait a year to write the end. Like, yeah. I can just sit down and do it in 25 minutes and then edit it away, and I'm done. I will have experimented with something in it.
I mean, one of the things I find writers don't think about enough and don't really hear enough is, you know, they say practice makes perfect, but Gloria and I have really seen more of the real research, and it's perfect practice makes perfect. You know, hence, like when you're learning choreography, you do all the choreography moves, but you do them incredibly slowly. And then they just simply speed up the choreography as you get down. The same with music and everything else.
Yeah, that's how you practice a piece of music, is you first start by playing it correctly, but very slowly. And then as you get better at it, you keep speeding up. But again, there is no benefit to practicing it incorrectly fast.
And so with stories, though, you don't know if you've done it correctly till you get to that end. And so, yeah, just do these little short pieces just to see, like, is this a fun story? And then, you can expand it out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah, that ability to just reiterate and edit and change it up repeatedly
Mhm.
to see how it changes the story really helps far more than I'm going to just try to write my first novel. Well, you don't know if the story is going to work till you reach the end.
And if it's going to take you a year to get to the end and then you realize it doesn't work, that is disheartening, isn't it?
So,
Or that you realize, you get to the end, you realize, okay, I don't know if this works or not, but I know I don't have the skills to make this better yet. So I'm going to have to table this or put it on the shelf till I get more skills. And you're like, what did I spend that year for doing a new one? Then I was just...
So there's also this thing you can do, a proof of concept.
Hello,
So
Jules.
that's Jules. So that's what I did for my horror middle grade novel that's currently on submission to literary agents. Querying, that's the word.
Mhm.
So I first wrote it as a 1,300 word short story and submitted that. It got into an anthology. And so now I have that in my query letter as, hey, it was accepted.
Mhm.
Like, there's something to it. So, like, it's okay.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. And
Another good
so
point.
I just
point.
basically wrote my midpoint turn, which was my original climax. So I wrote the climax of
Mhm.
like a couple of paragraphs of this is what went down. Well, mostly like one paragraph. Like, this is my main character. His sister is missing. His cat is missing. Let's go save them.
Mhm.
And then the expedition into the basement of the plant lady's house.
Mhm.
And then after that, I sat down and was like, I can make this a full-length story. And so then I went and I plotted out an entire story. But I had that short story to aim for, and it was really cool. It was fun.
And that's
Mhm.
kind of what we'll be also talking about with these stories, because especially that middle one, Ella,
Mhm.
is very much a concept story.
Mhm.
It's not a fully developed story. It's just someone's like, this is a neat idea. Let me just quickly sketch out this situation. And that's all it is. It's just a
Mhm.
situation.
I worked on a movie called, Come Play With Me?
Yes.
Something like that.
No, that's it.
It was originally based off of a horror short story film called Larry. And so they did that short film, proof of concept, got the funding, and did a full-length movie after.
Mhm.
Another one I was tempted to possibly put in this one, but it's a longer short, and we already had 3, really. But I really liked was an Australian short that then became a movie called Cargo. The original short is like 25 minutes, and it's about a zombie apocalypse outbreak. The father is transporting his daughter, who's a baby, and he's already been bitten. Or it might have been mother, but I want to say it was father. And he's realizing, I'm going to become a zombie before I can reach civilization, but I don't want to harm my child. And so the whole story is, how does he accomplish this? And he does. It's a very good short. I highly recommend.
Spoiler, Tom.
I highly recommend go look up Cargo. I'll post a link in a little bit. But they then got the funding because of this, and the movie version stars Martin Freeman, who is it that played Frodo?
Yeah,
He was Bilbo.
Bilbo. Thanks. And it's all right, but I love short form. I love that it keeps your attention the whole time.
It's not such an investment to pick up a short story and read it.
Right.
It's not like I'm going to spend the next 12 hours reading this book. It's like 20 minutes tops.
Yep.
So
someone else knows that one.
Yep. And I mean, like, we may still end up reviewing and discussing Cargo, the short film, in another season. Because as I said, we've been mulling over talking more often about short films, partly because they're more readily available on like YouTube and online in general. And partly because really, as far as teaching writing, which I've done as well, but mostly I've only taught writing in public schools. So essentially, I have a captured audience that not all of them want to be writers. And but when teaching writing to essentially unwilling students, I found that their skill levels in writing improved much quicker when we, really practice as a group and individually with short story writing rather than trying to write long form. That was one of the reasons I wanted to talk more about short story writing. Was number one, I had noticed among AuthorTube there was a bit of a resistance to practicing the skill. And I did not understand why, because I love reading short stories. So why if you're writing, why don't you want to write short stuff? But also because I, as a teacher, had noticed how quickly my students' skills improve when practicing short story writing. Honestly, their skills don't improve, or at least, and I mostly taught upper elementary and middle school ages. That is my area. Nothing against the 6-year-olds, but not all of them are potty trained. It just wasn't for me. Why are some of them not potty trained? All right, anyway. But so I've taught predominantly 6th through 8th grade. And teaching that age group of, 3rd through 8th grade. So teaching 8 to, 13-year-olds, maybe 14. 8 to 14-year-olds, one of the things I noticed is with microfiction, their skills don't really improve quickly. Because to get microfiction to work right, you need to be really good at, or you need to be practicing editing. Because microfiction, we're talking about under 200 words for the most part, you really got to get good at editing about what are all the words you have to include and cutting out everything else. That is like more of an editing skill, which is more advanced than what I was trying to teach. I was trying to teach writing rather than editing skills. So just to let you know, like what you need to work on, if you're like, what I need to work on is editing, well, then the answer is microfiction. I highly recommend that you practice that more. But if you're still working on your writing craft, I recommend pretty much practicing 500 words to 5,000 words, ideally, because that's where I noticed that was that sweet spot where I noticed my students' writing craft quality accelerated quickly. I did not mean to make that sound like this fun little alliteration, but here we are. So just to like give you an idea as far as working on your own craft, that is mostly the exercises I'm going to recommend for today. And that throughout writing, throughout us talking about short films, because we're going to have one more short film episode where we talk about science fiction in, 2 weeks. So what I'm going to recommend is that we're talking about 500 words to 5,000 word exercises so that you can be working on that craft, because I want you to get better quickly so that you see that you're making progress fast enough that you stick with the craft.
Do you want me to read a drabble so people can see what you can do in 100 words?
Sure. If you want to.
Sure.
Very Cool Gamer says she loves your shirt.
Cool Gamer loves your shirt.
Main Street Memories. Magical moments.
Very pretty.
Disneyland. Okay. So this was one of my drabbles that was accepted by Ghost Orchid Press. And the theme was outer space. Cosmos. So this one is called Spiderweb. A tiny piece of asteroid nicks the visor on my space helmet as I begin repairs to the outside of my ship, floating in the void. A spiderweb of terror cracks into existence over my left eye. The air hisses in a high-pitched scream as it slowly oozes into the vacuum of space, taking my body heat with it. Erratic breathing puffs and clouds, fogging... Oh my gosh, this is not... There we go. Okay. Erratic breathing puffs and clouds, fogging my helmet, its fractals coalescing, blocking out the distant light of stars. My eyes crystallize, daggers of ice delving into my retinas, blinding. Oxygen depletes, fingers lose their strength, setting me adrift. I am debris. So, with
good.
with little pieces, I find you don't have to do the entire story Bible.
Right.
Like, what race is, or like, what species or race is my
Character?
astronaut? I don't know. All I know is they don't want to die, so they're fearing the death. So that colors the adjectives.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I think that's really fun with shorter stories is you don't have to delve into like millions of years of world building.
What I like about short stories for me personally is if I get a really cool idea that I'm like, ooh, I love this, and I want to jump in with a short story, you really can just jump in exactly where you want to, write out what you have, and then go, okay, do I need anything more for this to feel satisfying? You don't have to have a proper beginning or a proper ending necessarily. You can just jump in where the action is.
Mm-hmm.
And just have the bit. And you don't have to explain how the characters know each other. None of that is necessary. And so you can keep that energy from that inspiration moment.
I remember, is hot cocoa a drabble?
I don't know what this is that you were speaking of.
My holiday card?
Yeah.
It's not 100 words exactly, but pretty much. Yeah.
It was affected by the
I mean, it's definitely one of your most popular.
Yes.
It's fun.
Yes, it is super fun. So
and there's art to go with it.
It is.
But yeah, that is why, in part, we wanted to talk about short films is because they make such an easy analog to short stories. That despite the fact that films are a visual medium, they're so similar to what short story writing and what short stories are that we felt like this would be a good discussion points.
Yeah. Doing flash fiction and short stories help you learn to start your story where it needs to.
Mm-hmm.
Like cutting it closer to the action instead of having all of this space where nothing really happens.
Yes.
Because you don't have time for that.
Right.
So,
ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah. Your word count needs to count.
Yes.
So yeah.
So yeah, that's like a lot of it that I really wanted to get through. So that's what we're doing.
So like Granny. Granny does not start at the beginning of the story.
No.
Of the inciting incident. It starts where the action is of why we need to be concerned and afraid for our main character. The surprisingly durable grandson.
Okay, so here's the basic premise, and everybody jump in if I'm forgetting points, but the basic story is this. Spoilers! Okay. So there's essentially two main characters. There is the titular granny, and there is the grandson. I don't remember if either of them have proper names, but it doesn't matter. What? Danny. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, because it's like Danny Boy or something.
Baby Danny.
Baby Danny, thank you. So we start with he's already screaming and bloody at the start of the film because I think she's already stabbed him with a knitting needle, still with her knitting work attached. Because tethered? I don't know. Anyway.
You need to have a path to follow him.
Right? Exactly. He is still trying to reason with her. I will admit, I don't know where she got the blood to write on the wall, but you know what? Maybe it was his. It's not clear. But essentially, on the wall, it's something to the effect of, I will not go to a home. Because he thinks it is time for her to go to an assisted living home. And we learn this later in flashback. But what then happens is it's a chase. Most of the film is a slow motion chase. His leg is already injured, so he limps through the entire thing. He in the house, he runs upstairs. She, however, takes the chairlift. So slow. But he is panicking. He's in some room, and the police have already come to the door because they heard screaming. And she has mollified the police. And the police drive off before Danny can get their attention, which is where we have one of my favorite scenes where we see the police driving away. And in the background, Danny falls from the second floor window and thuds and then gets up. And I'm like, my God, this guy. So now he's out on the street. Granny, however, has gone to her scooter and the garage door opens. So now she's on wheels and he's limping down the street. Nobody is out on the sidewalk, despite the fact that somebody called police. So, okay. And he is looking for any house with lights on. Again, we don't see any houses with lights. I guess because it turns out the one house he does eventually find is a key party. So I guess all the neighbors are there and they got all their keys in a bowl. And they're all concerned about him, but nobody's in a hurry to call the cops. I don't understand why. I want to point out, the scene that will quickly unfold has such artistic blood splatter. I thought it was beautiful, y'all. I just think is so beautiful. But meanwhile, Granny, still on her scooter, goes to see a guy who is outside in overalls with a name tag. I do not know why. It is nighttime, y'all. It is nighttime. And she's like, could you help me start this? It's a chainsaw. At night. And he's like, sure, absolutely. And then that's the end of him. Granny then, with her chainsaw, advances on the key party.
First throwing in
Mike's head. We know it's Mike because the name tag, but anyway. That he is now back out running, I think. Or no, he's
he leaves.
He leaves for Granny to make mincemeat out of everyone else at the key party.
And we get these great horror poses as she is, walking at people with this chainsaw.
She's definitely a woman who has just gotten to her enough face. This is it. How dare you? So then Danny finds her scooter. And he's like, I'll make my getaway here. Things don't go well. He's got a hard time getting this thing started. The tension continues to build.
The classic, I dropped the keys. Get on the asphalt to look for the keys.
He's such a mess. He is not doing well in his panic state. If only he knew how to phone worked and he could call the cops. Or an ambulance for that matter. Eventually he does get the scooter up and running. I don't know why it's got a gasoline motor when it's very obviously battery operated scooter, but okay.
And as I said, I'm pretty sure it's because this is supposed to take place sometime in the 70s or 80s.
And Tom is convinced they couldn't find any of those gas operated scooters. Yes, scooters used to be gas operated, by the way. When we were kids, the hover round and all of those were gasoline operated, which, wow, indoors, you say. Anyway. Something else entirely. But I think it was just, I suspect Tom's right. They just couldn't find any still working scooters. And so then they go with a slow motion squishing scene.
Mm-hmm.
Got the chainsaw. She is against the garage door, and he is slowly advancing on her and squishes her, which gets the chainsaw a little bit on her face. Y'all, the special effects are so good. It's not what I would call like a Cronenberg body horror level, but it is sufficient to give you that slasher flick. Then we cut to 6 months later?
Yeah.
Where why would we rent an ambulance when we could just get a moving van
or a bus?
Why would we get a bus when we could have a moving van and just open it up and just let all the people out who are now going to be in this institution? Some of them in straitjackets, some not. And we learn that, then we see Danny come out in a straitjacket, and the guy who drove them there is telling the nurse who's checking off as everybody's getting out of this small moving van, of like, oh, gotta be careful with this one. He doesn't do well with the elderly. And she's like, not that she doesn't say that. She says, oh, he's a little.
He has a thing for the elderly.
That's it. He has a thing for the elderly. And the nurse is like, oh, well, then he'll love it here. And then we see the sign, which is, a home for the elderly, and then hand painted at the bottom, and the criminally insane. And then we see all these elderly folks sitting in like garden chairs and tables. And there is Danny in his straitjacket, just.
They all slowly look towards him, and he freaks.
Right.
Freaks out.
And that is pretty much it. So what happened to Granny, we're not really sure. But I think there's a reference in the credits that will be a Granny 2 or something like that.
Massacre in the old folks' home. Right,
yes. So I assume Granny will be back. Which I liked that part as well, of like, yes, I like this this magical elderly lady who, while she may be slow moving, apparently has fantastic upper body strength, because chainsaws are not lightweight. And especially if it had a pull starter, those are not lightweight. So that is the basic. Did I forget anything important plot?
No.
Because we're about to talk about the pacing and the actual physical layout. So, that's partly why I didn't talk about it yet.
Oh, you did. There was one piece.
Mm-hmm.
right when he's got the scooter started and she's holding the chainsaw. Before we get the attack, we get this flashback of him trying to again reason with her and bring her back to her senses. And we do have this, surprisingly nice, quick flashback.
Mm-hmm.
Little scenes of him growing up with her.
Yeah.
Yeah, of them at the beach, culminating in him, showing her the pamphlet for the retirement home. And, so that we understand, she's like, after all I did, you just want to pack me away? But yeah, we were going to talk about pacing as well as actual mapping, which is partly why I didn't really touch on those in the story description or synopsis, was because we're about to talk about that. So that is the basic idea of the story. It is a really fun horror comedy. I do not normally say that about slasher flicks, but this truly did take a slasher flick and make it really exercise that concept of a horror comedy. There are some truly absurd moments and some literal laugh out loud moments. There's a couple scenes every time I watch that short film, I literally laugh out loud because it's ridiculous.
And it really does, and it is good at showing the importance in both tragedy and comedy is timing.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And they worked really hard on this, getting the timing right in every scene.
You can really tell that they storyboarded it. One of the things, the exercise I have for this short film, for anyone who is interested in doing the exercise, is partly because I think when people talk about world building, I hardly ever hear about them mapping out. So here it goes. You need a couple maps. You're going to map out on paper. You need a map of the street. And I want you to map out and be sure to mark where's Granny's house and where do you think the Key Party house is. Which side of the street. There's no exactly right or wrong. I ain't checking. It's fine.
Where is Mike?
But where is Mike located? But also you need to map Granny's house, since there are 2 floors, And you need to map out Danny and Granny's paths, both throughout Granny's house as well as throughout the neighborhood. So yes, this is like a horror comedy version of the Family Circus, Billy, and all the places he goes. Because both Danny and Granny cover a lot of ground. Why is this important? Because readers will notice, even if you overlook which right, left, any inconsistency, they are more than likely going to notice, and it will distract them. It will take them out of the story. So it is very important to practice mapping things out. Does it need to be to scale? No. Who cares? Nobody cares. If you want, you could go get your Monopoly little houses and just trace them. I have been known to do that. And just trace them on a piece of paper with the Widow Street. Okay? Nobody cares. You write it how you want to. It does not need to be to scale, but directions need to be correct. So which side of the road? You would then need to put the cop car somewhere on that street where it was parked. It was parked relatively in front of Granny's house. You need to have all this. You also need to map out the first floor of the key party. There's some areas you're not going to be sure of. Make it up. Be sure to include a kitchen, because all houses have kitchens. I did not make this rule, but this is a rule. Guess what? Also, all houses have bathrooms. This is a rule. I know. Although, oddly enough, it turns out in Britain and British Commonwealths, often if there's only one bathroom, it's upstairs, not downstairs. That's wild to me. Because here in the deep south, if there's only one bathroom, it's downstairs near the kitchen. But in Britain, it's upstairs. It's above the kitchen upstairs, but still it's upstairs. Hello, Nia. So that is your assignment if you are interested in this exercise, and to map out Danny and Granny's entire, like, all the area they cover. It doesn't need to be perfect, partly because, like, some of the film, we don't know exactly the path Granny takes inside the swinger's house. But you can make a guess based on blood splatter. So try that. And then if you are still interested in exercising more, take a story you've already written or one you're thinking about and map out that coverage of everywhere a character goes in a town, in the story. Even if it's a short story where it takes place just in a neighborhood and there's not a whole lot going on, that's fine. Map it out anyway of every house they go to and where, because this is very good practice. It's something I've noticed a lot, even in more advanced writers. They're not always mapping it out, and it shows in their stories where I'm like, hold up, wait. How many houses are on the right? It doesn't sound like there's any houses on the left. Do y'all not cross streets? What is this? Hello, Maggie. So that is the exercise. Go on. What, Laura, do you have opening salvos about the short film Granny?
So one thing that I liked was the changes of speed of the characters moving. So there's Danny, the guy, who is moving, pumping his arms and moving like his life depends on it, because it does. Then there's Granny, who's just leisurely taking the chairlift up the stairs at a leisurely pace, and it cuts back and forth. And one thing that you can do in writing to emulate that is vary up your sentence, paragraph, and word length choices. So when Danny is running, it could be like punctuated with breathing and very short sentences and little paragraphs of like his feet on the staircase and his breathing fogging up glasses or whatever, and just little things that are impeding him being able to see what's coming. And then when Granny is like, if he looks back and sees Granny, it'll be like just long, leisurely
very long sentences.
You could have run-ons for stylistic choice there. You could have fragments from Danny's perspective for stylistic choice there, but just vary it up so that you have more.
You could have Danny with short sentences. Everything he's even internally thinking of is in these short staccato sentences. Gotta get to the house. Gotta find someone here. Of like everything like has an exclamation point implied, at least in his mind, because he's panicking so hard. Also, I'd recommend if you are asking for alpha or beta readers, if you have a map, be sure to include a copy of your map when you are asking for, commentary for critique, so that your readers can check what you've written against your map and make sure that they both align. Because if you don't have a map, how will they know for sure and catch it before, official readers read it and then find it distracting because they keep wondering, wait, what direction? You're going to think, oh, they should be caught up in the moment. But I'm telling you now, readers get caught up on these little details. So they really do need to be approximately correct. They don't have to be perfect, but they need to be, in a general sense. If you wrote left when what you meant was right, that is going to catch readers, is the problem. So you got to catch these things.
Or for me, it was the scene on the second floor when the police are starting to drive away and Danny's trying to get their attention. It's like, but it's a glass window. Why aren't you breaking something, Danny? To get their attention. And then it's when he realizes to break the glass, that's when the police are already driving away. So he's too late. It was thought of. It's just he's so panicky. It's actually harder for him to think of, the logical steps in, a timely manner.
Sometimes when you map things out, it's not just buildings, but positions of characters. Like, okay, I've read things where it's like, okay, two people are interacting, but like, I think one is facing one way and one facing the other way. But then the way their arms are moving would break their... I don't know how they're interacting. Like, my brain
We actually were played out talking about that for Ella. Since a lot of that short film is, the dad character or the hunter in the woods turning around a lot. And that was actually where we were planning on discussing of, okay, so how do you do this? And the answer is you actually map out the forest floor and then you have figurines with, so one's going to have a toothpick or I suggested a rolled piece of paper taped to it for the gun so that you can actually make sure that every couple paragraphs, they are facing correctly. Whatever direction each character is facing and moving in is correct. Like you're describing it accurately. Because again, it gets distracting for readers when you think it's one way because the writer did not fully describe it at the beginning. So the reader made an assumption. And then later there's a better description, but they're like, but hold up, that doesn't match my internal imagination of what this looks like.
Unless your character is as lost as you want your reader to be.
So that's actually what we're going to talk about in more detail for Ella, because spatial awareness is more important than you think it's going to be in this story. Now the first, we're talking zero draft. Don't worry about spatial awareness. Just write it. Just write. Have fun. If that's what makes you happy, just write it. But by the time you're on the second draft, you really do need to have maps to make sure. Even though, like, I know not everybody's super thrilled with map drawing, which is why I'm saying you don't have to make it hard. I promise you. I promise it does not need to be complicated.
I've only really drawn 2 maps before for my writing. One is a solar system. So I came up with the planets and the moons and the asteroid belt and the Kuiper belt and specific things in there and the comets. But I also have drawn the neighborhood, like the street for my Nightmare Lane series. So I know which house will have which monster in the series. So I know where the friends live and who's passing which house when. So that's been helpful.
Yeah, especially if you're writing a kids series, you know, especially those who are younger than high school. That better be consistent story to story if this is a shared universe. Because they got nothing else to do in their life. They are mapping this stuff out. They are taking notes.
Yes.
They will quiz you on your own story if they ever meet you.
They are mapping out the Starship Enterprises by how many steps it takes to get from here to there.
That was correct in Galaxy Quest.
Yes, that was accurate.
That was a known thing.
That is a known thing that the young do. Yes, absolutely. But even older folks do that. So at least having a basic map sketch can be very helpful. Even if at first you think, I don't really need it. Go ahead and do it. But on that note, why don't we take a bio break? And when we come back, more Granny. So may I suggest now is a wonderful time to make sure that you have some delicious tea. How about a snack? Have you checked in with your bladder today? I'm just throwing that out there.
And we was missing.
Uh-oh, I left it in the closet. Shoot.
Darn it.
And with that, we'll be back in approximately 10 minutes. Maybe 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 beep beep beep. Boom. Well, here we are again. Fancy meeting y'all here.
Fancy that.
Mm-hmm. Megan says, wow, that sprint ended faster than I anticipated. What did I even do while the timer was counting down?
I was chowing down on snackage.
Me too. I made peach cobbler last night. And then this morning I was making oatmeal and I thought, you know what would be great with oatmeal? Peach cobbler. But it's a lot of food, so still working on it. Because I am not about to waste peach cobbler, y'all. And then I put half and half on it because, of course, I did. So that is my breakfast I am still working on. Tom, you muted?
I love the Twitter
Yes.
post that Spence posted.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I was reading that. I was like,
Same.
yes.
Yes, every 13-year-old is cringe. This is known in education.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's nothing in Turning Red that was incorrect. If anything, I kept looking at Glory going, so, bringing back memories? How triggered are you?
Because, you know, we've all been 13, and then I also taught 13-year-olds for a little bit, and the cringe factor.
And, like, everything was either you or our other sister.
The mermaid, making every boy a fantasy mermaid? That one wasn't me. That was the other sister.
Of like, yeah, it's right there with it's either a merman or a centaur. I mean, it's like I want to look at the muscles and shirtless, but not ready for other things.
Yeah, I remember like other 13-year-old girls, like my friends and other ones. Mermen were not that popular when I was growing up. It was centaurs. So I want to give him the top of a handsome boy, but the horse side of a female horse. Why? So much to unpack. But that was what a lot of the girls in my age range did, was top half male, bottom half female horse. Okay. You do you, babe. The 90s were wild. That's all I have to say.
But yeah, like everything in that though was so correct and accurate to what I remembered of that time.
Yep.
And one of my sisters did every scene in that movie,
Yep,
especially the arguments with the mother.
Oh my God.
So, you know, at the end of it, I just looked at Glory and went, look, Glory, you got your wish. It's a non-female unit character. There's no question that this is a female character.
Right?
Not just because of all the jokes and references to, what was it? Is the red peony blooming?
Is the red peony blooming? No. Yes, maybe. I don't know. Like, no, we don't all turn into a red panda when it's that time of the month, honey. Like, it's such a great movie, y'all. It's so fun. It's so cute.
And the, look at my butt, Mom. Look at it. I got a butt. Ah!
I still remember getting my little sister, who's 7 years younger than me, to hold my mother's head and make my mother look as I wiggled and shook my butt and hips, in demanding that my mother acknowledge that I had lady roundness. Demanding that my mother acknowledge my like growing womanhood. And my mother's like, nope, I don't see it. You're still a child. And me going, hold her head straight. You know, my little sister, who's like in elementary school, going, okay.
I never did that.
Okay, the problem was I was going through adolescence while my mother was going through menopause, and it was a wild ride for both of us, okay? It was a very, hormonally, the women in my mother's family, we are kaijus. We are monsters. The hormones do terrible things to us. I am so glad I'm on hormone therapy. It has made me a person other human beings can stand. And I am grateful for modern medicine for being able to put it in a little pill, and some of them being affordable, not all. So,
But,
yeah.
but really though, like both parents act to her as she is, a daughter, not as a gender neutral child.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's like, oh look, someone finally made one.
Right. It is refreshing. It is wonderful. It is super adorable. It's cute. All genders can enjoy it though, because we all had to be 13 at some point.
We all had to be cringe at some point.
So cringe. So cringe. I remember all my friends like gushing over, neighborhood boys or whatever, me going, okay. Open the door, throw the child. Oh my God, my father literally did that more than once. And then when I grew up and got married, my now ex-husband used to do that every once in a while. And now that I am long divorced, occasionally Tom's just like, here. Doesn't even say anything, just leaves. Would you like to see evidence? The latest bout? Why do you think I sent all y'all chocolate? Because I've got so much extra. Because Tom's always like, feed the beast. Here's more chocolate.
You forget you have chocolate when you need it.
It is true.
We have to keep extra so that your
forgot.
brain will happen across some of it.
I've got, of course, the Cadbury egg. There's 2 more in their kitchen.
Really, that's a caramel one. That's not one of the regular ones.
I just said a Cadbury egg.
Okay. No, but remember you say like you had one and that's enough for the year? And I just realized like, you do know that's the caramel one, right?
No. I know that I only can stand enough like sugar of just eat one of these a year, and it takes me a while to nurse it because I like to lick the filling out. Gary says I was in theater, so I was over dramatic cringe at 13. Yeah, we all were, sweetheart. Finn says the closest I had to that was insisting my mom stop making me buy boy jeans because they worked for her and her body shape, but gaped so much on mine. Oh my God, the gape. My mother was genuinely upset about how huge the gape was on the jeans that I wore. Like, not that like, oh, I was wearing special jeans. It was just the jeans she bought me because my butt ballooned out in adolescence. Like in middle school, my butt like grew another butt.
No, honestly, I just
I'm
was
so
just
glad
remember there was at least one pair of jeans.
This like phenomenon.
There was one pair of jeans where the seam on the side started to split.
And the gape was so big that Laylee, our little sister, would put like cans of Coke in there so I could smuggle it into the movie theater. So we could fit 2 cans of Coke just in the gap in the back of my jeans because my butt was so big. For realsies. Hence, the hold her head and make her look like and making my mother look at me like mooning her, my enormous butt, and like, do you see it? This is not a child's rear. Megan was homeschooled at 13, just getting into rock music and a total Jesus freak.
We've all got our different ways, but we're all cringe.
Let's be honest, it's his own cringe, you know? Jesus freaking? That's cringe, honey. We all were cringe at 13. It is a requirement. I think it's like, it's baked into human DNA.
Like, at least in the U.S. school system, it has been for over 50, 60 years. It's just plotted out and assumed that your 13-year-olds, aka 8th grade, is just a placeholder year because the hormones are hitting. They can't think straight. You're not going to teach them anything new. Yeah. And so 8th grade is always a repeat of everything they've learned the last 3 years.
There's literally nothing new in the curriculum for 8th grade. Unlike every other school year leading up to, like 1st through 7th grade and 9th through 12th, there is at least certain subjects where there's new things being taught and they rotate it around year to year. What's new? There is literally nothing new taught for the 8th grade year in American curriculum nationwide. So, and it's because like I've talked to so many teachers back when I was a student as well as when I was a teacher about why don't we teach them something new? It seems really boring, and it seems like maybe that's partly why we have behavioral issues for 8th grade. And every teacher was like, honey, I've been teaching 40 years. We have tried. There were experimental years where we tried to teach them new things, and it only makes them mad. No. We repeat the same stuff as a comfort to them. And then they understand when they get to 9th grade and they're in high school that they have to adjust to a whole new system. So 8th grade is just a placeholder year. It works out best this way, as well as several teachers told me that way. Though you can also do special projects because they ain't gonna miss anything. So you can just go off curriculum for 8th grade, and they can do all sorts of odd, weird projects, and it's fine because everyone knows the curriculum is nothing new. Sometimes genes are necessary, like when you go out to the woods and you do not wish to have ticks. At least
What?
for me.
Skirts instead of jeans.
No, no, that I mean this one.
Oh, maybe it was about why 8th grade is just a repeat year. Like, and we try, and then, but that way you can do special projects. So that's often when they read that movie with Rob Lowe as a teenager, The Outsiders. That's often when they read The Outsiders as 8th grade, and then they'll do a project, like they'll do poster boards about The Outsiders or My Side of the Mountain or Hatchet. You know, movies about angsty teens. And then they'll do projects based on that, and that's wise because they're not going to miss anything if you just go off curriculum and do special projects. So it's a way to keep them interested in having fun while they, wait for the hormones to catch up and then go to high school.
Mm-hmm.
Megan says, I was taking high school courses in 8th grade. My mom was in charge of lesson plans, so I didn't get that break. I do remember spending a month on this one math topic, torture. Oh, that sounds torturous.
Yeah, I was homeschooled 7th and 8th grade.
Yeah,
That
again,
was
like,
awesome.
You're not really missing anything. 7th grade, the only new things that used to be taught was pre-algebra, and then they didn't teach that to everyone. Because not everybody's brain is ready for pre-algebra. So, Carrie says, I remember reading The Outsiders and Diary of Anne Frank in 8th grade. Yes, that is what we do across the country. For 8th grade is, hey, so you've just discovered angst. Let's do poster boards.
And all the boys, I'm trying to figure out how the best way to phrase this. All the boys in 8th grade are dealing with, plumbing redistribution.
A lot
and their
of
pants are all
binders,
too tight.
Yeah, a lot of binders held in front of their crotches. Yes. It's a rough time. So that's when they start separating the kids by gender, in part because the girls' area, like when you sneeze, and not all of them have proper supportive garments yet, and they get embarrassed and then they act funny, like act out, and boys similar but downstairs. So that's when they welcome the separation of the bodies, if you will, because then while the other girls may notice and the other boys may notice, they don't make the same kind of staring that cross-gender has a tendency to do.
And the teachers just accept when the boys are like, I'm going to sit here for a moment while everyone else leaves the classroom. I'll leave in just a minute.
Hence, the teachers are like, fine, I'm eating my lunch, don't talk to me. And the boys are like, yeah, okay. I remember sometimes it would be up to 3 different boys sitting, and I'm like, look, I don't need to talk to you, but I'm going to eat. Don't talk to me while I'm eating. And they're like, you can all draw. And they're like, oh, yeah, let's draw. And they're all drawing those ridiculous S's. You know what I'm talking about? And lightning bolts. And I'm like, good job. As I'm just stuffing my face because I have literally 20 minutes to eat food before my next class. And this is all I have. And I've got to get this sandwich all the way in and down to my stomach. But I've got a tiny esophagus. Yeah. So it's like, we don't talk. You just stay there and you leave when you want to. Okay.
Because, yeah, teachers understand. Like, you can only... The hormones are crazy.
Yep. Yeah, they're just, it's rough. And everybody knows because everyone had to go through it. So, and honestly, most schools, at least down here, do try to weed out the, shall I say, less compassionate teachers, at least the teachers who are less compassionate about puberty. They tried to weed them out of 8th grade. So most of the actual teachers teaching 8th grade, at least around here that I've experienced, are actually really nice people, like who are understanding puberty is rough. I mean, I can't speak to the rest of the country, but most school systems do try to put in the really compassionate teachers into the 8th grade because you don't want to traumatize them too early. That's what high school's for.
And always keep plenty of those little 50-cent, $1 deodorant sticks.
Oh, yes.
In the office.
I remember, like, as a student teacher, you're called in to do substituting all the time if they can't get a replacement. And one of the 8th grade teachers, like, literally had a drawer, and it was just tiny deodorants that had been donated by everyone in the school as well as parents. So, like, often the custodians would spend their own money of, like, here, I smelled a child. Here's another one. Figure out which one it is. Because, like, puberty, it hits.
And also, those are the teachers who have to have the talks. Axe body spray does not equal deodorant.
Or soap. Yeah, like that teacher had a whole drawer, and it was like little travel deodorant and little travel bars of mostly Irish Spring.
I mean, that stuff is astringent. It will remove whatever smells.
And then I had to have a talk with one kid because he was just rubbing Irish Spring on his underarms and then wondering why it was itchy.
Oh.
And I'm like, it don't work that way. You have to use water to wash it off. And I'm like, let me see what it looks like. Like, he had a serious rash. Like, it was oozing. I had to send him to the school nurse. I'm like, look, we got to get this dealt with now. It's oozing, kid. I'm sorry. All the kids are making fun of him. And I'm like, look, if it were just like a little scratching, I wouldn't send you out. But you've got to see the nurse. Oozing is bad. It could get infected. You don't want an infection under there. Trust me. You need that underarm for the rest of your life. And he was like, fine, I guess I'll go. And I'm like, I hope you feel better. Make sure to bandage it tonight. Yeah. He had just taken that little, and he was rubbing it since it's a deodorant soap. And I'm like, that is not how soap works, sweetheart. You have to rinse it off or else, yeah, you'll get a rash. Like, yeah. And then you're sweating, so you're getting it. But he was like, but I'm sweating and it's getting wet. And I'm like, but not rinsing off. Because the thing is, the hormones hit, and I swear the brain goes out. Like, they just dumb as dirt. That is the problem with hormones. That's why, as humans, we have to stay in groups. Because think about a 13-year-old out on their own in the woods would die so soon. We would not
according to my side of the mountain.
That is how you know it's fiction. Or
also
started
crushed
later.
My dreams.
I would say also don't forget, puberty used to start much later because you need fat. You need a certain amount of fat to start puberty. So
also,
it may not have started yet.
Puberty, the more stressed, like stress, a person experiences, we found it turns out that is what is the catalyst for puberty to start. So if you got a stressed 8-year-old, they're about to hit puberty. Like, and I mean real stress. Life,
what? But you got a dream life, middle class kid without ever having any
puberty
problems.
Ain't gonna hit till 14, 15, 16 then.
Yes, cool gamer, I have glasses.
Yes, she's wearing glasses right now. So, anyway, back to Granny. What I like about Granny is the pacing there are plenty of moments that they use to give a breather to the audience. Often, the breathers are when we see Granny's point of view. Which is kind of unusual. That's sort of the twist a little bit, because often other films and stories try to use when we see the killer as the part where we're supposed to get more and more agitated or anxious or suspense thriller. But instead here they used Granny as the breather moments where things kind of slow down a little, where they're not as intense. But in order to keep a good horror tension, you don't keep a good horror tension. To actually have good tension, it needs to be more like a roller coaster. So you need peaks and valleys, frequently changing hands. So pretty much anytime we were seeing Danny, it heightens the tension. And when we see Granny, it lowers the tension. And that is something to keep in mind when writing horror, when even inflecting that horror thriller tension into your story, even if you're not trying to write horror. Maybe you're just trying to inflect a bit of a horror element into an otherwise,
Well, even if you're just doing a dramatic scene, you still need to know how to ramp up your tension so that it's effective. Because if you're at a horror where the tension just always stays high, everyone says it's a pretty poor horror because they don't notice that difference in scare level.
Yeah, humans acclimate to whatever the constant is very quickly. Like, we're literally talking 5-10 minutes.
Like, and to give you a sense of how much this is programmed into us, your body, your skin cannot tell the difference between hot and cold. It can only tell you how much the temperature has changed from the room temperature you're in. Very hot water can actually feel like very cold water if you don't know which one it is, because it just tells you what's the temperature difference.
Mm-hmm. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're like, but I don't know how to maintain the tension. Congratulations! It is not necessary. It's not what you're doing. The thing to keep in mind, you've got, like, horror. One of the things that horror does very well is dread. But you don't need to feel dread all the time to feel dread. So with the reader, you want to identify the dread fear. And then you can, after examining that, then cut away for a paragraph or two to something else, like, oh, but we also need to walk over here. And then we're back to dread. You then, they remember the dread, or something else happens to remind them the dread exists. And we keep going back and forth. I like that he's right above her name. I'm just going to be over here in the corner.
Yeah.
Like a dog.
He's so cute.
Yes. So, I mean, that is one of the things I found that Granny did very, very well. I also did like that they covered so much ground in 15 minutes. And yet I did not feel confused about each room or each building they were in, because the set design was notably different for each, as well as the color casting. Like, you could tell they had a colorist, and not just because there was a colorist listed in the credits. But Granny's house has a color cast to it. There's these blue tones.
Everything's color graded.
Versus the Key Party is all in ambers and oranges and yellows and browns. And then the old folks' home is in these black and whites with green accents. The coloring helps. which again you can do with your own descriptive text to set each scene. And it doesn't take a lot to describe those. And in fact, even describing like just some of the decor and the color scheme can be the pause needed before you go back to the dread.
Sometimes pops of colors can help people have like a subtext of something's a little off here. Like a lot of horror yellow, like with Georgie's coat in It, and Coraline's coat, I believe, and Coraline, like lots of yellows for the innocent characters that something bad is going to happen to. I have one short story where the main character doesn't see much color because everything is so dim in the soot labyrinth that he has grown up in. But then somebody falls from the ceiling from an upper level, and she's got a lantern that is made with bits of broken chipped glass of different bottles, so they're different colors. So it's like rainbow light everywhere. So, but the light that falls on her face is red. So it's a little bit of a subtext, like she's not all she seems.
Have you updated that story? Because I feel weird for saying I don't remember the multicolored light part.
For Soot Scan?
I know which one you're talking about.
No, that was always in there.
I was trying to look up to see if this was still true, but I know growing up they used to say, and again, I do not know how accurate the study was done because this was before like it was easy to go look at people's cited sources. But they used to talk about the fact that babies cry longer in yellow rooms because yellow is actually a color of tension. That yellow heightens emotions versus other colors that do not necessarily amplify emotions. But it doesn't heighten only negative emotions, it heightens all. Hence why McDonald's chose it as one of their two main colors. Is it just heightens emotions. It just like intensifies. I guess it's really
Hence sunflowers and the way we think of them. Most of the time, very cheerful, but occasionally I've seen sunflowers used in horror, and it's very fun.
So, like McDonald's, they are using an orangey red, like a tomato red, with yellow, and because reds, especially the more orangey or yellowy reds, often are associated with feelings of hunger in humans. So, therefore, yellow being an intensifier gives this impression of I'm really hungry now that I've walked inside a McDonald's.
Is that why you always say during our bio breaks to go get a snack since our background's red?
No, I say to go get a snack because I know writers forget to feed their body. And I don't want them feeling negative, i.e. my blood sugar's dropping while watching my show. I don't want to be associated with that feeling.
Point.
That's why I actually say go get a snack or get tea, because most of the time people add sugar to their tea. And again, so if their blood sugar is starting to get low, it'll raise their blood sugar and they will not associate feeling that empty middle of the afternoon feeling with the show.
Yeah, the minions are just pure emotion.
So, I mean, in fact, there's actually a lot of research done into color theory, although most of it is it's culturally specific. So just be aware of that. Okay. So that is something that I would mention is like just be aware of color. That's often why like the idea of Little Red Riding Hood is it's just red stands out to people. Also, the reason why Little Red Riding Hood's cloak hood was red was because red was seen as a lucky color for what hundreds, almost 1,000 years in Europe.
And a lot of Asia too. Like it's really a Eurasian thing, and a bunch of places have like red is such. Bright reds are also not easy to make. So to get a bright red is also because you're standing out. Everyone will notice red. We are programmed to notice red.
So, like, that is part of where Little Red Riding Hood is given that cloak by her grandma. So then her mother is like, go visit grandma. Grandma gave you this thing, go show it to her. Da da da. You know, it'll keep you safe since bright red is seen as lucky and protective. That has been sort of lost culturally. Things have changed a little bit. But still, just to be aware of what colors mean for you culturally, and if the color is significant for those reasons, so you're including it in a story, I would recommend having the characters mention that.
I mean, hence turning red. It's red pandas, and it's the red that's lucky. Hence the irony that this panda is anything but lucky for her.
Yes, red is a big deal color in a lot of different countries for, a lot of reasons, but mostly it's because it's seen as lucky or good fortune and protective. And in fact, red stockings was the most common color in Europe for 400 or 500 years? Something like that.
And in part, it's because blood is red, and blood was for a long time seen as, life. That is, the source of life is your blood. Because people noticed when you bled out, you died. So that obviously red is what brings life to you.
So, like, everyone had red stockings for hundreds of years in Europe. And it wasn't, a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Oh, they're like that. No. It was just seen as like, if you want to be healthy, then you should have red stockings on. And in fact, that was like a doctor's treatment was often, you also need to be wearing red stockings every day. So something to be aware of. So red petticoats were quite popular, again, as a secret way to keep the disease out from underneath your dress.
Those pesky peeking
and
diseases.
And we see some of that color theory over in Granny with the key party is very orange.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it's paisley also to give you a sense that this is a 70s, 80s time period. Because Chile, where did they find so much paisley? But everything is orange. It is truly a time period of when this was big. Like the color tells us a lot about this people in this scene.
Mm-hmm. So it's something to keep in mind that if you're using color as a signifier in your story, be sure to have the characters discuss it so that if someone is reading it who is not part of your immediate culture, they will still understand what the signifier means to your characters. So, anyway. Was there anything else about Granny we wanted to mention? Anyone?
No, just to really study it for their timing. Note how long they keep you tense and how long they give you breathing space back and forth. It's a good lesson to take and to make little notes about. Try to write a story similar with that same pacing, because they really got that down well.
So, let's see. Carrie says, Mary Queen of Scots wore a red petticoat on the day she was executed because it was the color of martyrdom.
All right, so shall we go on to Ella?
Mm-hmm.
Ella Enchanted.
Oh, bad enchantment.
Bad enchantment.
Ella definitely made me think of a writing prompt story. Like when you don't have so much a idea for a plot, but you just want to see how an idea plays out. Because watching, at least for me, I felt like Ella was story prompted by what if Little Red Riding Hood was the wolf.
Mhm.
To me, that's the gist of it. And then this person plotted out and created a story around it of what would that be. Because there's the huntsman, simultaneously trying to save his daughter and kill the wolf, and being very conflicted about this problem. And we even get that with what happened with the dog.
So creepy.
But I mean, also it brought up a good point of if you're going to kill the dog, it works in this type of story because we don't have a lot of scenes of emotional attachment with the dog. The dog is very utilitarian. It's always doing something, but it's not emotionally connecting with the father character or really the daughter character throughout the story. It's the dog's just there. And so we don't have that same emotional attachment. So it's not as problematic.
Well, so the issue with so traditionally the reason why we recommend writers stay away from killing off dogs and cats is because most readers and viewers, if we're talking about visual medium, find it so off-putting they turn away or stop reading or stop watching. And that's actually the real reason we recommend against killing off a beloved pet. Is because people will just stop watching. They'll just leave the theater. They'll stop watching this or reading the story. They'll just walk away. And you don't want to have the reader so off-put they put the story down. You want them to be like, oh, but like to keep reading. And if they're so upset they stop reading, no, that has not worked out. Because like the goal is for them to read the whole thing. If they don't read the whole thing, and yet it's the kind of story that ticks their boxes, then that's a bit of a failure, storytelling-wise. So I just want to make that differentiation of this is one of the very few examples I've seen where killing the dog, spoilers, it actually isn't off-putting where it makes you stop watching. Or at least I didn't find it to be. And in part because we don't get attached to the dog. We aren't really introduced to the dog, and we don't even see the other characters interact with the dog. So we're not even mirroring those sort of attachments or empathies.
Nor do we really
it's still
see
not great when it happens. It's like, oh my God.
Nor do we, actually see the violence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We hear it, though. We hear like a little bit of it. And again, that is one way to soften the violence, is that it's not a full scene of violence. It's maybe only one of the senses, not all the senses. So, okay. So the basic idea of Ella is from the start, we are seeing it from the father or huntsman's point of view. He's washing his hands. He's got blood on his face. He then walks by a room where we only see the fallen female with her feet up, she's on the floor. There's blood all around. There's been a commotion. Things are falling on the floor. There's a mess. And he is getting his rifle, his shotgun, and loading it up and then grabbing extra ammunition, and not like in a calm way. You can tell he's trying to be calm, but he's not succeeding. Because if he were calm, wouldn't he just take the whole box? Because he ends up grabbing everything out of the box, but he's kind of scrambling at it. He's not thinking entirely clearly. While he seems relatively calm on the outside, we see these slightly erratic, and we kind of know Okay. He is actually upset inside. He's trying to remain calm, though.
Mm-hmm.
I believe then we see him taking gasoline or kerosene to a room with what looks like a child's drawing in it. Like it's like a shed type room.
It's plastered in kids' drawings.
Yes. And then he's walking away and we see what looks like the house is smoking. And the dog is with him as he walks through a grass field. Yeah, Lydia, you do think he is the villain. And he's heading with purpose to the woods. So,
As the house is now burning down behind him.
with the body still in it. So, he gets to the woods and he very quickly finds a fallen branch, and under the branch is a piece of red fabric, which he smells. He keeps smelling the fabrics throughout the whole thing, which I'm like, what is happening?
That's like, is that his superpower? I don't know why he's doing that. Like, if he had the dog smell it, I would have understood to track.
Right, yeah, to go find her, but no, he's smelling it and he's not giving it to the dog to smell, and the dog runs off.
Okay.
And then, he calls out to Ella, and we then hear this weird sound because the sound sounds younger than the presumable age of the girl that we then later see in his flashbacks to him and presumably his wife and his daughter standing in the grass field with the dog. So, as well as he has flashbacks to the same woman who, I think is supposed to be younger than the actress really is.
Mm-hmm.
They try to hide it with like her growth by having her turn around and stuff so that she doesn't seem quite as old, but and but the voice that they use that he keeps hearing doesn't seem to quite match the apparent age of the actress. It sounds more childlike. And which I kind of wondered, is he having a mental breakdown? Honestly, maybe all of them are having a mental breakdown. I don't know. Things are not going well, I'll put it that way, for sure. And so that was one of the things I was wondering was like, he's the villain? Is it because he's having a psychotic break? However, after that, since remember the dog has already run off and he's now heard Ella, and she has this soft childlike voice as they're playing at sort of a little bit of a hide and seek cat and mouse type thing. As he keeps searching around the forest for her. And then we hear the dog whining, and then it is not whining anymore. We will not see the dog alive again. They continue to look. He continues to look for her. We see him from all these angles.
There were too many angles.
The editor flipped it a couple times, so sometimes the blood's on the other cheek. It's very distracting. I'm like, there was no continuity, lady. They did not pay for continuity. Or they should have shot more. The director should have, or the cinematographer should have shot more of these angles so that the editor didn't have to flip it and use it again. Because, what we did note was the audio is correct, though. So the way human minds work is you have the audio give the direction, and then we show the visual. If you do it the other way around, it really feels uncanny to human beings, where you have a visual of a direction change, and then an audio to match it. It tends to feel uncanny to human beings.
That's why jump scares.
Yeah, that's why jump scares work. Versus if you have the audio first and then the visual, that tends to feel more correct to human beings. And so we did note that they did do the audio directionally correct. It's just the editor, in order to match the audio, kept flipping these seeds. So we noticed the blood kept moving from which cheek. And in the future, the answer is put the blood on the side so not every shot picks it up. But that's not actually important to writers. That's just us. Eventually Ella finds him, or Ella confronts him and knocks him to the ground. And is wearing the dog's face and the dog's collar. The dog had an unusual collar. In fact, we were actually talking about it pre-show. That we see in one of his flashbacks where the dog is in the grassland with him, that the dog has this very large buckle-like collar. Yeah, or put it on both cheeks, although that's a little odd. Yeah. Versus again, like when the first time I watched it, I was like, is he hallucinating?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It wasn't clear. I wish it had been clearer. Ella still appears childlike in like just smushing his face and turning him away while sitting on top of him. Like truly to be not really in like cognizant of what's really happening here. And he doesn't act quickly. He doesn't move quickly. He moves slowly. I assume not to startle her. And grabs his shotgun and shoots her off of him and then shoots her again. And then takes the shotgun to himself. I think that's about it, right? I mean, yeah. There's a bunch of flashbacks in and out again and again. There's not a lot of different flashbacks. It's just the same ones again and again.
And, again, we just applaud Anthony Head's acting ability because he has to hold this weird emotional expression at the very end as his character is supposed to have this flashback to the happy family he just had and lost. And
yeah, I agree. And I got the sense she's the one who killed the mother and then the dog, and so he killed her. That is the impression I also got.
When I first saw this, I thought that was just a dog mask.
Yeah.
I didn't realize.
Because kids often do, like, if they have a dog of a particular breed, often they like things of that breed. Well, kids. I say kids. I mean all humans. Because, when I had a dachshund, it's like, give me all your dachshund stuff. And now that she has passed away, I'm still like, give me all your dachshund stuff.
And we never see her holding an edged weapon.
So how
you would need to that quickly remove just the dog head face. Like it's.
You just get a skull in there. It's kind of hard to.
Yeah.
Some things did not entirely make sense. And this one is really, I think, as spare a story as you can get away with and still have it work. Because it still does have horror. It has heightened emotion. It does, keep you into it. You are sitting on the edge of your seat going, what happens next? So it works as a story.
And there is also still physical and emotional grotesque.
Yeah. So it works, but it's so spare. I really don't think you can get much more spare in storytelling than this. And it work at all, let alone as a horror.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think this is an excellent example of how you can have a surprisingly spare story still work effectively to tell a story. I mean, again, remember, this is a short film. We're talking about short stories. We're not talking about full-length novels. And it is not necessary to have a beginning or even a proper end, necessarily, in a short story. You can just have the action. So there are plenty of things we don't know in this story, but that does not disrupt the appreciation for the story as it unfolds. So we don't know what led to the start of this. We have no, because they seem like in the flashbacks a nice, happy family. We do not know, was suddenly something cracked, or was it always like she had a duality of spirit? Or is this an enchantment? Who knows? It could be.
Is it a chemical attack changing the way they're all seeing and thinking?
I mean, they've got the grassland in the backyard and the woods. Did she smell something that made her go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs? We don't know. Believe it or not, there are actually there are things in the woods, even in Europe and North America, that really do make people kind of lose their minds temporarily. And they hallucinate and they can even become violent. Some of them are fungal, others are other kinds of plants, but there are real things that grow in the wild, I think on most continents, that if you accidentally come across it, you don't know what you're dealing with, you're about to have a really wild, unpleasant trip for a while. You know, it's usually not for several days. It's usually only for a few hours, but it's like, don't eat anyone's face in the meantime. Like, and I'm making a joke about it, but this is actually true. And I have been warned as a Girl Scout about these. Because honestly, for the most part, scouts are useful for a few things. And one is warning you about the things you need to be aware of, locally speaking, when you go out into nature. You know, spiders, snakes, potentially ravenous fungi, whatever. You know, it happens.
Me eating snails.
You never know what you know, that's why you need local nature groups to like warn you. So that
Megan has a question.
Why did no one warn me about that when I lived in the middle of the woods? Did you hang out with nature folks? Because usually most of them like will warn
Love
each
to
other.
share.
Yeah, they love to point out everything they know, and they usually love to tell you all the things. Don't eat that; that'll kill you.
What other tastes good, which isn't that much actually in nature, and yeah, what'll hurt you?
Yeah, don't eat the like. What is it? You can squish the puffballs, but don't eat them.
Well, actually, it turns out puffballs are edible.
Turns out some puffballs are edible. Some of them are really bad.
Yeah, so you really have to know. Although even the edible ones, it's like only the young ones before they really become a puffball. Once they're a real puffball, ugh.
Yeah, there's a lot of nature that will just, you know, could make you just trip balls.
I used one of them in my Harry Potter fanfic.
The more you know.
The more you know.
The hag's knife was laced with it, was lacquered with it. So, hallucination time.
Yep. I mean, like, these are not good trips. They're just trippy trips.
Yeah.
I remember when I was in the Facebook snake identification group, and like, you know, 90% of them are, it's this, you know, at least in North America, it's a water snake. It is whatever region you're in's water snake. That's what you're seeing. They're harmless. They're nice. Leave them alone.
Yeah. Sven says all mushrooms are edible, some only once though, and I enjoyed Megan's response.
Spence!
So, but like, there are like real dangers in the woods and even the grasslands in North America and in Europe. No, I'm aware of ones in Asia. There's ones in Africa. Yeah, it's just everywhere. You know what? Everything's out to kill you. So I kind of wondered, did something like that happen? But then he doesn't act like he's surprised. He acts just like, okay, well, I guess I need to wash my hands and then go get the rifle. Okay, buddy. Shotgun, excuse me. So, do we need to know these things? No. Will the Raiders discuss these forever afterwards? Of course, yes. That is what headcanon is for. It's super fun. So, what I liked about it was you really don't need to. Now, Tom's theory, unless you're in Texas, then the water moccasins are the local. Yeah, they're water moccasins.
Water moccasins were the ones in my cousin's backyard.
They hold grudges. Water moccasins hold grudges. They remember you.
Although I think some what do you call it? Evolutionary pressure has made the water moccasins in at least South Mississippi much more docile.
Well, that's because they killed all the super aggressive ones.
Yeah, they're weird. It's weird now seeing of like they're pretty chill down here now. Not in my childhood.
Hello, Michael. How are you? So, But what I wanted to highlight is a lot of the times when I've talked to people about, well, why don't you write a short story version of that? It seems like an interesting premise or an interesting idea. And they're like, oh, well, it's still a lot of work. So if I'm going to go to all that work, I might as well write a novel. And I'm like, what? There's not a lot of work. You don't need to do like an entire world of world building. You just jump in and you fill in the parts you need to. What I will say though, Tom's idea was that this was originally a story prompt that was, what if Little Red Riding Hood is the wolf? Or if the wolf possesses the Little Red Riding Hood and she becomes the wolf. And then somebody then ran with it, which I'm like, yeah, that sounds plausible. Like that was the story prompt. Although it would be kind of fun to think about that for other fairy tales. It's Hansel and Gretel, only Hansel and Gretel are the ones who eat the witch.
Mm-hmm.
And are out in the woods looking for witches to eat.
That
So
could
tasty.
be fun.
So tasty. I love old ladies. They're so good stewed. I don't know.
They've really grown in all that flavor.
I mean, when you love the taste of old lady, then the only thing that will satisfy is old lady. That's terrible. I'm going to hell for that. God, Lord, why am I like this? So
maybe they want food that comes with built-in toothpicks. Skinny rib bones. That's all I'm saying.
Brittle bones, they shatter. You know, toothpicks forever. So, all right. So here's the main exercise that I've thought of for this one. Okay, here we go. One of the things I have noticed is that while many people talk about how much they enjoy writing purple prose, that maybe their purple prose could do with more honing. So here we go. There are 3 areas in Ella. There is the house, which is in a tattered mess. There is the grass field behind the house. And there are the woods. Describe any or all 3 of those locations and describe it very well. This is the time to break out all your thesauri and use every variation on a word you can. Get as purple as humanly possible. Describe the grass blowing gently in the wind, how tawny and yellow it is. Use all the words, all your descriptive text to describe, for instance, the grassland, and then the forest wooded area.
And you notice throughout his feet move very differently throughout what he's stepping on, because like some of the forest is very mossy and like it actually kind of sinks a bit.
Yeah, you can actually see because the video shows his feet sort of sinking into the moss.
Versus others softer, and then there's, inside the house where it looks like wood and some stone floor.
Mm-hmm.
And stone don't give, it just breaks all crockery.
Yes.
Also, the point of view should tint how you describe things. So are you describing them from the main character's point of view, where he is extremely fearful and things could be lurking in every shadow? Every twig snap could be the herald of something coming at him? Or are you doing it from her point of view, where everything is offering places for her to stalk closer, and different points of view will make you use different descriptors to make things more appealing, more dramatic and scary. If you're describing that grass field, probably more nostalgic and loving and homey for that flashback. So definitely tint your descriptions with the point of view's feelings.
I would recommend that if you are familiar with each of these settings, that you use your own personal experiences, in the sense of, like, if you've ever walked through a high grass area,
Ticks.
Well, there is ticks, but also often like people like to run their fingers over the top if it's soft grass. Versus there's other kinds of grass that have these little,
Barbs.
they're almost barbs, but they're not like real barbs. It's just if you go the wrong way, it hurts. And so you don't always like to run your hands across it. It just depends on the kind of grass. And
Thistle.
to use, yes, the thistle type. So you're going to use like the kind of descriptive words depending on who is doing it and what kind of person. But describing each of these settings, you need to use all 5 plus senses. Since I hear now we're doing like 19 senses, I can't keep up. We have plenty. The bottom line is
sense of time.
it's 5 plus, okay? But use at least 5, if not more, kinds of senses to describe each setting. So not only would you need to describe how it smells and how it looks, but you would need to describe how it feels. So you would, like, so for instance, you would describe the floor. If we're talking about the stone floor in the kitchen of that house, it's a very firm floor. Nothing moves. And it's kind of cool to the touch if you don't have shoes on. And slippery if you have socks on. But if you're talking about the floor of the forest, because of the nature of how the trees shed debris and it turns into humus, it builds up, and it also is very air-filled and water-filled, so it tends to be squishy when you walk. So that feels, it's not exactly terrible, but it can feel unsteady. And it can feel also sometimes, depending on the type of surface, it'll feel a little bit like walking on a moss-filled pillow. It's something like you would describe how, like, the feeling of walking, the sensations of it. And what you hear. When you're, say, in a stone floor kitchen, you're going to hear echoes. Versus with you're in a forest or the grass area, you would hear the murmuration of the wind. Since Tom had a very nice description of how wind is generated right around a forest that he was describing earlier today.
So you get wind when you have a temperature difference. So the top of the canopy takes all the sunlight. It's very hot, but the ground floor in a forest is actually very cool because it doesn't see much sun, and it takes longer for the air to warm up. But a field right beside a forest or in a clearing will get direct sunlight, so it's suddenly going to be a lot hotter. And this difference between that hot and cold will always make wind. So that's why anywhere close to a forest or even a copse of trees, there will always be a little bit of wind blowing because you just got that temperature gradient. And that's, what the wind's for, what it does is it, helps even out that temperature.
Mm-hmm.
So there will always be a little bit, and that will carry smells.
It carries smells,
wherever that direction.
Sounds. Because, like, if you're a city person, then maybe you don't know that there is no such thing as real silence in the forest. Because there's so many living things in that forest, I promise you.
Also, the forest will always be moist, but the grasses will be kind of dry. And again, you'll feel that difference.
Like, there's bugs, there's small animals, sometimes medium-sized, like rabbits, birds. There's always animals around, and you're always being watched when you're out in nature. It's something to remark upon in your descriptive text. Is while all of this seems silent, none of it is actually silent. I promise you, the animals are watching these 2 humans and the dog. And that is something that you can use as part of your descriptive text. Now, so you're going to use as many different words as you possibly can fit in to your description for each of these settings. Each setting needs to be a minimum of 500 words, no more than 5,000, but you're probably not going to have to do that much. But I really want the first round for your 0 draft describing each of these settings to really use every variation. Like if you look up how to say humid, what are all the different words for humid? I want you to look at all those and then figure out how you get as many other of these synonyms as you can fit in to your descriptive text. Because that is your first step, is how many different words of the same kind, the same meaning, can you fit into your descriptive text. Then your second round, you're going to edit out everything it doesn't need or interrupts the flow of. Cut ruthlessly. You're still going to have a fair amount of prose left, and that is perfectly fine. And in fact, that is desirable because I want you to have the best of your prose remaining. So the first thing you have to do is you have to make clay. You have to write all the words out, and you have to keep writing all these sentences of a million different ways to describe the same kind of things. And then you make it sound like you meant to do it. And then you edit down everything that doesn't feel like it quite belongs or that it's not really useful or helpful. And then look at what you have left. Because I want you to have better purple prose than what you've had in the past. And the way you do it is this exercise. I mean, there are other ways to do it as well, but this is one of the exercises. So Maggie says, a lot of my novels start as a short of the A plot, then I weave the B plot and C plot and false lines. Yes. So then, so we're going to take a short 10-minute break. And when we come back, the last thing we're going to talk about, Ella, is I'm just going to, once again, we're back to map building, where we're going to talk about how to make sure when you have essentially this, what is it? It's the hunter trope, isn't it?
You mean fully bloomed?
No. We're going to, I'm not yet done talking about Ella.
Oh.
But when we come back from the break, I have one last exercise to talk about Ella, and then we will talk about in full bloom.
The cat and mouse trope.
Yeah, the cat. Thank you. It's like a hunter thing. You were talking about it with Jurassic Park. I can't remember. It's a trope. I know it's a trope. And we'll talk about that because it's one that I frequently come across in other writers where they get it so wrong, it's distracting when trying to read it because it gets so confusing that even I get dizzy trying to read it. So we're going to talk about a way to approach it where people don't get dizzy from it. So we will see y'all back here in approximately 10 minutes. Hey, how's that snack? How's your tea? Have you checked on that bladder? Did you find it in the closet? We'll see you soon. Maybe beep. Maybe beep. Maybe beep beep beep. Boom. Yay, we made it.
Been a while since I had some good cocaine.
Mm-hmm. Laura had to go. Hello.
Neato.
Hello, Everett. Okay, so here it is. The other exercise is this. You take a piece of paper, and just as I talked about with Granny, where you write out the floor plans, or at least a basic sketch, do the same for the forest floor. And you'll be like, but Glory, it was just trees. I know. So normally when you draw out a forest floor, you mostly just draw circles of varying sizes, and that implies the width of the tree because you're looking directly down. You can also put diagonal or horizontal or vertical like rectangles, and that implies logs. Sometimes in forests there's like a stream or a creek or another water feature, like a little pond or a marsh. And the purpose of this, to have your little forest floor, is you're going to need, so for instance, in this example, you'd have 2 figurines, and one of them is the huntsman, and one of them is Red Riding Hood. And why, yes, you then need a rifle or shotgun for the huntsman, which Tom suggested taping a toothpick to the figurine. I was just going to roll up a strip of paper and again, tape it to the figurine, whatever. You live your life. I don't care. And then with the Red Riding Hood, why, yes, you do make a little cape out of paper or something. And what you do is every time one of them moves, you would then need to describe it. You are then moving them, the figures, on your piece of paper in relation to each other and then describing what you see so that your description is accurate in physics. Because, hardly any writer seems to ever get this one right. And the only way anyone will ever get better is to practice. But Glory, I don't do forests. Okay, my sweet, I accept you don't do a forest. It is time to draw out on a piece of paper city blocks. Because again, you're doing a cat and mouse between 2 characters trying to spy each other. And you just do squares and rectangles for all the buildings. And you've got sidewalk and you've got road. And you have corners.
And just do a basic little movement sketch, from Family, what is it? Family Circus.
Mm-hmm.
Of what are their position, how did they get there, and which points, are they at in position 1, and then position 2, and then position 3, as they're trying to find each other. And that also then tells you the descriptions to use later in your story.
So it is perfectly acceptable that you just play around with this for a little bit before you ever pick up a pen or paper or type up description. But you definitely want to be using this interaction between 3 dimensions and 2 dimensions, i.e. a floor plan, whether you're doing a cityscape and doing cat and mouse trope, or you're doing a forest floor or a more mixed grass and tree wooded area floor plan for your setting. But anytime you're doing cat and mouse, where you have 2 characters who keep turning on their own axes as well as moving forward, backward, up, and down, you really do need physical representation so your descriptions are accurate. Because most writers I've talked to think it's fine. I know what it's like. I'm literally just writing something I've seen in real life. And at some point between writing down and then thinking, people seem to somehow get confused. And I'm talking about myself here. They get a little like turned around in their own head, or they skip one of these reassessments. And that's when the reader gets lost. And you think, well, if I just have it interestingly enough, the reader's not going to get caught up in who's turning where. Au contraire, my sweets. No. What happens is everybody starts off with imagining in their own head what they think it is, because that's how people are. We are geographic spatial creatures. It's part of the hardwiring of human beings. All our brains grow this way. And even people with memory loss due to brain trauma, if they still retain that part of their brain, they can still remember memories based on geographic locations. Because that is how important geographic locations, i.e. being able to get back home, is so important to the, furthering of our species. So this is actually really important for your readers, that you have this spatially correct, or they're going to get confused. And if they're confused, they're going to put the story down, or they're going to get angry at the story. Neither of which thing that you, as the writer, want them to do. But what is the reason Red Riding Hood's cloak was soaked red and she was constantly sucking in fresh blood? Now, Maggie! Maggie!
You click. Or I'll here.
I thought you were clicking things.
Don't worry. But I actually do know of a manga. Like, it's definitely a hard R type manga. But it was one I came across of where Red Riding Hood was a semi-immortal serial killer trapped in this childish body. It was dark and creepy and weird. I think she may have had like a half-wolf child.
Fun times. So that is the other exercise to do. Pick your exercise. Y'all have 3 different exercises to explore as writers at this point. Now we shall go on to In Full Bloom. Or as I believe Maggie called it, a very disturbing profile of grief and grieving. You're not wrong. Okay. In Full Bloom. It is about a housebound woman. Like, she gets a package. It's delivered outside. Does she go outside? Does she open her front door to go get it? No. She just uses the tool of, skillful old ladies everywhere, the grabber. And sticks her little grabber outside, grabs the package, and brings it in. Like, she is truly housebound. We see that she has a whole, indoor gardening section of her house, where she gardens in potted plants. She opens the package up. It is 3 worms in a petri dish of dirt. Tom? I thought you were going to complain about the worms.
I was going to let you finish the story before we get on to complaining about things.
Okay. She puts the worms in a pot with a plant in it, and, goes about her day, goes to bed. Overnight, the worms get out of the pot, and they go exploring in that room and create a hole, which the lady finds in the morning. She notices it because the worms not only have their hole, but they're also taking her things, like her framed pictures, and trying to, on their back together, scoot her possessions into the hole. And she tries to take her things back. Yeah, it is bad claymation worms. I mean, they do move weird. Did you feel called out? So this continues to happen. All her things keep disappearing into the hole. She tries to staple a tarp over the hole to stop it. Like, I mean, they've made a wormhole because I think that's the joke. These worms made a hole. It's a wormhole, therefore. And it's pretty big. And they keep taking all of her things and putting them in the hole. And then it disappears. And at a certain point, we then see, she's like, well, I'll just go to bed. And she's just holding her frame picture. Presumably, she has lost her husband or somebody close to her. And I believe that's what the picture is supposed to be, the frame picture. And she goes to sleep like, maybe it'll be fine in the morning. It is not fine in the morning. All her stuff in the entire house appears to be gone. I swear it looked like they tried to take the stove oven combo, but it was too attached to the wall. It looked like it was like had been pulled out a little bit. So pretty much anything that wasn't nailed down is gone. She's still holding the one plant. I don't know what happened to the picture frame. Because she was sleeping with the picture frame and then it's gone.
Oh no, the picture frame, flew off. It's that she was actually holding on to the plant.
And she lets the plant see sunlight, I guess, for the last time. And then walks over to the hole, sits down on the floor, and scoots herself, jumps into it, and that is the end.
I mean, Gloria's first response to watching this was, what was it? I loved you, and
I loved you, Joy Luck Club. So pretty. The actress is very good. I do have issues with this story, but part of it is we're never told what the main character, or the only character, is thinking. We have no idea. Why is she not talking to the worms? She should be talking to the worms. She should be complaining at the worms. Why is she not talking to the worms or to the frame picture or to the plants? People I know who are really into plants, like this lady has a ton of potted plants, and she's so silent. I really have an issue with the writer/director. Why did you take away this lady's voice? I really feel like this character was silenced a bit. Versus, I feel like this would have been more horrifying and scarier if we had more of access to what was going on inside the character emotions wise and perspective wise. Why did she jump into the hole? Was it to go get her stuff? Or was it because her life is over? Because we see her at a certain point, she packed up her things when she realized what the worms had done, to the hole. She packs up a small container, a small suitcase, and almost leaves the house and then changes her mind like, I'm just going to live with this.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead and click the back.
They are feeding the hole which by the end becomes a metaphor for the hole in her soul left by her spouse's death that she tried to fill with stuff in her crowded house. When the bedroom got emptied, they got the picture. Okay. Yes, such a good movie. Oh my God, Joy Luck Club made me cry so hard so many times. Yes. It is very Asian or Asian American in its themes, which is great, but like, stop taking this woman's voice away. Like, that is already enough of a problem. Tom thinks it made me think of the hikikomori disorder in Japan, where people become mentally stuck in their house. And Maggie says grief stole her voice. She doesn't even say the prayers for her loved ones out loud.
But we don't even have flashbacks to understand this character. Like, that's the problem, is where it's not a long enough movie so that we can infer about her. Like, she's very stoic, so we don't even get facial expressions to instead tell us. And that's where it kind of falls a bit short, in that we don't get enough information. Yeah, we can infer it's her loved one. It may be her spouse, could be her brother for all we know. And that, yeah, the plant she's holding on to is the one they were raising together, which is this little magnolia. And we see it in several pieces of no, they love this particular type of plant. So, we get those senses, but as far as her and her thinking, they don't use any methods to let us know what's inside her head.
And she doesn't leave a note or anything. I mean, presumably there's nobody left. But I understand the metaphor of grief has stolen her voice. But how will we know what is going on inside? She knows there is a world beyond. She could thrive and signified by the blooming flower, but she can't go out there.
And again, also, we don't know what her views and thinking is about that wormhole because, I mean, we
it's
know.
not a black hole. Tom and I actually actively discussed this. See, a black hole continues to grow. The wormhole stops growing.
But also, we know the worms come back after going into the hole.
Yeah.
To then take more stuff. So we know it is not, but she doesn't. She's only seen stuff go in. So we don't know if she thinks of, oh, this could be another way out, or is this her way of dying? Of, well, there's nothing else of my stuff left here. I might as well go to my end. Like, we don't know what's inside her mind, so we don't know which type of emotion to feel.
Like he says, Asian women of her generation often do not feel they do not have a voice, and when the one who spoke for them is gone, they don't know how to speak. She fears the world beyond her grief more than the wormhole growing within her grief.
Yeah, it's a great metaphor.
I loved it as a horror. I personally found it horrifying to imagine that all my things could be taken away, disappear, all the things, the souvenirs of my loves, of my memories, my experiences. It does have layers. That is horrifying, that all your things could be gone. And you're left alone in the world with nothing. Not even your souvenirs or your memories. What do you do with yourself? How do you live on? No, I think it has a lot of layers. That was why, in fact, this was actually the short film we debated the longest about whether to include it in the horror section or not.
Well, I mean, but I see what Maggie might be getting at, which is a lot of what she got is because she knows the context. That This story is so sparse, it relies on the audience's prior knowledge of contextual elements to this experience to infer everything that's not said or mentioned and that you're supposed to understand about her. And so that's our real problem, is that it requires so much prior knowledge to make any sense. You have to have a lot of life experience to cipher this story.
Mm-hmm. And Maggie says, I also took it as a metaphor of Alzheimer's disease. I think you have an excellent point. I haven't thought about that, but I think you definitely, because yes, it steals your memories. I have a friend, and I'm closer friends with her daughter, who's older than me, but where the mother of my friend, half the time when she's visited, doesn't even remember her daughter anymore. It steals your loved ones before it takes their body. It is cruel. They look like the person you've loved your whole life, but that person is no longer inside them. Their spirit is gone. It is a worm of the mind. I agree. So, but nevertheless, as I said, I found it horrifying. I found it definitely something worth us discussing. And really something to think about short story-wise. I did find it very sparse, very spare story. However, that's not a bad thing. I I think we knew from the start that the worms were going to be hotly debated, as well as how to deal with the worms. Should she have fought the worms more, gotten out the pest killer? Of course, all of this could have been shown or not shown. That's something that like each individual person, writer, can choose for themselves.
And I had hoped, but I understand stuff. Life happens. Of Laura being here, because I did want to make the joke / comment everyone makes who works with animators of it's so hard to get animators to go out and experience the world. Like they are kind of actually like the woman in this movie. I mean, this short of like this animator obviously didn't even go study earthworms and how they move on the surface, let alone how do they burrow.
I mean, these are cartoon worms.
Very cartoonish. But I was just, that's all I can think about. Is like, it's so hard to get animators to go into the outside world. They'd rather just stay in their houses and draw and animate. Like Disney talks about having to like threaten to fire their animators if they did not travel to Hawaii or Australia or New Zealand to go scuba diving or all these other things of like having to literally threaten their jobs to get them to go. It's so hard to get animators to leave their house, even on what everyone else would consider a vacation.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's what I just kept thinking about every time I saw the worms. Of like, I mean, they were animated, they were fun, they had character, but this is not quite earthworms. What's going on?
They also looked a little cheap.
I understand may just not have had enough time.
And it sort of stood out in how rich the rest of the set design looked.
I mean, because that house is full.
It's so authentic looking. I'm like, yes, this is pretty much every little old lady, particularly and specifically every little old Asian lady's house I've ever been inside of. Doll says, I know people who have lost almost all their belongings, and it is a terrifying thing to go through. Yeah. I think the point of the worms was that they weren't normal. Yeah. That they're somehow otherworldly. But why did she order them?
Although I would have preferred if when she handled them, maybe actually just have some earthworms so they seem real. And then when they pop out in the middle of the night, that's when we see them stop acting normal. You have a true Trojan horse.
Mm-hmm. Were they in her imagination?
I mean, good points. But again, we don't get enough context to actually infer any of this. And it's don't go, oh, but it leaves my audience with, more things they can imagine and put themselves into. It's like, what you're saying to me is you didn't actually finish the story in your mind. You just had the scene you wanted to play out and you don't have reasons why.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like I thought, or the fascination of why does the wormhole just pull in all of her stuff? Again, it could be a metaphor for Alzheimer's.
Well, remember the worms are on the back of all her things. They're actually, you see them because she lifts up the picture frame.
Yes, but I'm saying like when her bookcase gets fallen down, we just see like things just start collapsing in. Like at a certain point, it stops being the worms gathering and just the hole is now pulling in. It's so hungry.
I think it was still the worms. Or I think it was supposed to be. Maybe.
Well, then we should have seen more worms come out of the hole. And that was my other problem is like, we don't then see like, do we see a whole lot of more worms now come through? Like this is a heist movie for the worms point of view.
It's a worm heist. Yes. Doll says it's so hard for animators to leave the house. That has been the most relatable thing I've heard in a while. Yeah.
Seriously, I
like we've watched so many documentaries about like trying to get animators to go see those animals in real life, let alone out, maybe in the wild or in closer to their natural environment. And animators refusing to get on the plane. I think the one was I was watching a documentary about the three caballeros.
Mm-hmm.
And so that one, Disney made the U.S. government wanted Disney to make this film as part of, what was it? I can't remember. It was some trade agreement, but the South American, North American trade agreement.
Yeah.
In the late 40s, early 50s. And so he's got to make this movie, but obviously most of his animators had never been to South America, and the whole thing's supposed to take place in South America. And everything they drew when they drew sketches of like all the animals, all the plant life, it all looked cheap. It looked fake, was what Disney said. So he decided, okay, I need them all to fly out there. And they need to just go study it, fill a couple sketchbooks each with all of the sketches of all the animals and how they move, and they'll be fine. And the animators like refused, all of them. And he finally had to charter a private plane and literally threaten their employment if they didn't get on the plane. And that was with their wives and families already on the plane waiting for them to get on there. And that's how Disney was able to get the animators to get on the dang plane to fly to, like, I don't know, Peru, Ecuador, whatever, wherever their first stop was, to go study all these things. And I just thought that was like, my God, refusing a 2-week vacation. And all you do is just go sketch everything. All you do. He brought cases upon cases of sketchbooks and supplies, and it's like, all you do is you go hang out with your family, you go sketch all the animals, sketch all the plant life, and enjoy the food. That was literally the assignment. Go enjoy the food. It was all paid for. And they were still like, man. And I just thought that was really interesting, because that was how Disney set his animation separate from all the other animation studios. Was people were marked at the time how Disney animation really looked like a totally different level. The movements looked so much more natural. The animals looked so realistic. The plants all looked really realistic. And that was why people were like, oh, but Disney's good, is because he was requiring his animators to actually have real life experience, even if they fight it tooth and nail.
I was just thinking of some of the ones I've heard about in different documentaries of them complaining about how they couldn't get the animators to go on a vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Like Finding Nemo, they could not get them to go scuba diving. Entirely paid for by the company to go tropical scuba diving.
Mm-hmm.
And the same with Lilo and Stitch. Go to Hawaii, have fun, see the place, take sketches. They're like, no, I don't want to go there.
And then they didn't want to leave their hotel rooms. And they're literally HR is having to go, let me explain. You will no longer be employed here if you do not go out and enjoy the beach. Go out and enjoy the jungle forest and draw. You have to leave the hotel room. Your family has gone. They have gone on the tour.
Yeah, they paid for the rest of the family to go
you
too.
Go.
For all of these animators. And still, they're like in their rooms.
Yeah. So, like, I've just come to accept that this is, part of a profile of, are you someone who doesn't like to ever leave your house? Let alone go on vacation? Is it something like tooth and nail for you to go out there? Maybe you might be an animator, Because I love to go out into the world, but I am not an animator. It's not my deal. Maggie said, the first thing I thought was grief when she was in the empty house with only the plant. I thought Alzheimer's. Megan points out her grandfather worked on 3 caballeros. He was in charge of making animators keep Donald Duck looking the same throughout the movie. Very important job. His hands were too bad to draw at that point in time, if I remember the legend correctly. Yeah, I could see that.
But I mean, yeah, you do need someone, because I've seen the images at different points, and yeah, Donald Duck, for such a simple design, is actually tricky for animators to keep the same. Like,
I was like Donald Duck's big butt. Even when I was a kid, I really liked it. Doll says, I mean, I do simplistic animations for my YouTube videos, and I rarely leave the house. Maggie says, I remember when they made the animators for Little Mermaid go sit in the aquarium at Epcot. Yes, like is a problem. I mean, now they try to do it for most movies, I'm told. Like, at least for good animation, is you got to make the animators leave and go look at the location is the problem. I've traveled now, and I'm in this life period, not leaving the house. I did start animations.
Is it just a human instinct?
Now they have people who will walk around and film things like a freaking drone. I want that job. Your job is to go to a place and live stream back to Animator Bob. He'll tell you what to look at.
Anything to not have to leave.
Yeah. Like, I know that like Disney would even have animals brought from the local zoos because the animators didn't even want to leave the studio to go to the zoo to go see how the animals move. Of like, what is up with animators? It's just like, nope, this is where I live. He's got a duck butt, and we cannot lie with skinny duck thighs. I love that, like, especially the old Donald Duck butt. It was very fluffy full.
Of course, I love that with actual ducks. Like, that's one of the few things ducks do I think is really cute and adorable, is that little side-to-side tail waggle.
Yes. I do love it. Hello, CB. How's the move going? So, like, that, like as I said, I really liked In Full Bloom. I want to make that abundantly clear. I was very happy to include it, but it's a quiet horror is the issue. And I wasn't sure if other people would see that it is quite horrifying. Whether we're talking about a metaphor for losing one's own memories, you know, the memories that live inside our head, i.e. the house, or if it's, you know, a physical thing of all our things disappear overnight while we sleep and they're all gone.
You get a metaphor for a natural disaster.
It's horrifying, but it's a quiet horror. And I think many times when people think horror, they think splashy stuff. But, like, think about the In Full Bloom. It's a quiet horror. It is actually quite relatable. It's in a regular sort of world, with the exception of these worms. But I mean, like, the setting is very realistic. It's very relatable. And then this fantastic thing happens, and it is a bad, fantastic thing. And the woman, she yells for a moment, but that's like it. She then comes to a place of resignation relatively quickly, and then enduring. Let's see. Maggie says, the moment the flower bloom, I hope she would go outside. Yeah, me too. Of like, you just letting it have some sun, I guess.
Well, CB stopped in. I hope you
Okay.
keep getting some sleep.
Good night. Yeah, I like quiet horror. I like those, like, and that with quiet horror, when you don't have, you know, chainsaws and things, and you don't have big natural disasters, you just have little horror. I think those can be very powerful in stories.
Because they're the ones we can relate to more personally and closely. Because we face those a lot.
Yeah, again. For a lot of terrible things that I think people don't think about, because, like, there's no chainsaw or gun.
But it's where she went from a life that was predictable, highly controlled, not a lot of, you know, change, to suddenly in one night, it's all gone. What does she do now? All of her expectations for her future are gone.
Mm-hmm. So that was why, like, I wanted to include it. I think it's beautiful film-wise. I also think it's very interesting discussion-wise for writers. Because I don't think quiet horror is really given a lot of attention. But the nice thing about quiet horror is often it is highly relatable, and it is easier to fit into a otherwise normal story, if you will. You know, like romances, contemporary fiction, memoir type stories where you're taking, say, a childhood experience but giving a little twist, it's much easier to put quiet horror in than big splashy horror.
I mean, it's an odd one, but to me, like a sort of case in point of just how memorable quiet horror is, even though people don't think about it as much. But Stephen King's Misery,
Mm-hmm.
of most of that is just quiet horror. But you're inside your head and you're dealing with one other person, and it's such a struggle. But that is one of the ones that people most talk about his stories. Even though, yeah, there's not a lot of big supernatural stuff going on, unlike his usual storytelling. Misery is actually one of his most discussed.
Mm-hmm.
Because it made a big impression on a lot of people.
Hello, BA. Maggie says, but with Alzheimer's ability, perceived time is lost too. Is it really one night, or is it just her perception of one night because all the days in between are lost too? Doll says, Misery was the most terrifying thing I read, and that was around the time I was dealing with a crazy stalker person myself.
Oh my. Like, as far as like, not a good thing to read during that situation.
So, yeah, like, I think that I felt like it was important that we make room for the quiet horror, the relatable horror, instead of just the big splashy horror. Because, yes, the horror comedies and things, they are super fun. Part of what makes them fun is that they aren't as relatable. So, yeah, I guess it's more of an intimate horror.
Yeah, Doll, I'm surprised you kept it together and you can still talk coherently, because just you combine that story with, active real life, and
It's a lot, yeah.
that's hard.
So, and again, how would you write a story like this where there's no dialogue, but yet you do not want it to be exposition city? Remember, you have to show it instead of tell it. Because that is the one thing I could say for the story. They do not tell. It is only shown, and you've got to figure it out on your own.
And we see also with this one of, it's a good story. There's a lot in there, but this is one of those ones where it does help a lot to have alpha and beta readers, so you can better judge what context do you need to add in that others might not have to understand the story you're telling. Like, is this across multiple days? Well, usually we can show that by seeing more plants grow. In the meantime, that would indicate us of it wasn't just one night. This is actually over a longer period of time she's not noticing. Of, you can put in these little clues. People rewatch it. People will reread it if it's something they enjoy, but give them the clues and context they need to understand your story.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, there's ways to handle all these little issues we've pointed out in both In Full Bloom and Ella. And it doesn't change the story. It doesn't detract, but it's just little context that does help keep your audience in the middle of your story, instead of wandering all of a sudden of, but wait, what is that? What's the situation? You don't want them asking too many questions while they're watching.
Mm-hmm. Well, you want them asking the questions that you lead them to ask.
Yes, hence in Granny, and the whole, why didn't he break a window? Oh, he does. He just is so panicky. He doesn't think about it till too late.
Mm-hmm. The narration is on the details of the setting.
And again, it's the, when you're doing your details, what's different? What is it you want your audience to notice? What is it that's not just like every other place? But I mean, we see all three of these, they're still all enjoyable. They're all interesting. Pace helps a lot. Keeping that tension going.
I would have liked to see more of the worms taking things in, like a longer
build up. Especially of her noticing. Like, I would have liked to see
her
them take a
fighting
few
the
things.
worms. I think I would have liked to see more of a struggle.
It's just summon a fiend.
Ah.
Well, I mean, all that kind of brings up, something else Gloria and I try to remind people about is the details don't have to be visual. You can do it with the smells. Smells tell you a lot about a location, and the sounds you hear. Like, do the floorboards creak, or do you hear creaking, or do they comment that it's oddly silent? It gives you a sense of like how old is where they're in. Does it smell like wood? Does it smell like 100 years of floor wax?
What is the vibe in the room?
Is it cold and clammy? Is it dry? It tells us a lot about what kind of person would want to stay in this environment. / how do they feel about this environment? I know whenever the humidity goes below 40%, Glory starts talking about how she's just wasting away and drying out. And I'm just like, Megan would die here. She wouldn't be able to breathe. But like, there's so much more context clues you can give that help people kind of get pulled into their place.
We know. We know it's not for you, dear.
You didn't complain about being in Arizona. We know how you feel about humidity.
Yeah. 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 Like, there's plenty that you can describe how things feel when you touch them. As I said, there is earlier in the episode for the Ella video, we actually have an exercise on practicing your describing, skills. So there's touch, and there's touch even in these outdoor settings. So there's a indoor house setting. There's also a grassland setting and a forest setting. And the part of the exercise is to describe 5 or more senses, how the setting is with 5 or more of your senses. And that includes touch and smell and sound, and like how things feel, like the movement of it, as well as the vibe of an area. People talk about the silence of a forest, and I'm like, have you been to one?
If a forest is silent, it's
shit is about to go down, y'all.
Well, that, or it's, some kind of toxin that has killed it off and everything has died there. Like, that's also not a good sign that you should be walking in a forest that's silent. Like, everything's dead. Why is everything dead?
But also, like, in theory, forests are never silent because of the nature of wind, and trees murmur. Trees murmur all the time. Trees are enormous living creatures. There's fluid coursing up and down them all day long. And we don't hear it, like, it's not that loud. However, if you take a stethoscope to a tree, you can hear the liquid moving through a tree, even a pine tree. At least that's what we used to do at camp. And it is amazing. And then to realize that while the stethoscope helps you hear the sound of the fluid moving up and down and throughout a tree, in reality, we are actually hearing that in force. It's just so faint that it's hard to be very consciously aware of it because of how loud our own heartbeats are. Our heartbeats are incredibly loud. Now, our heartbeats move at a certain pace. And if it's beating faster, it's also louder to us because that noise. So think about a rabbit that has a faster heartbeat, or a mouse that also has a faster heartbeat, and how this noise is deafening. And it deafens us to the sounds of larger, slower beating creatures. But like there's sounds all throughout the forest. And in fact, that's something I used to do as a kid because my parents had a stethoscope. Is I would walk into the woods with the stethoscope and then just literally hold it around because it helps you just hear better. And notice like all the sounds. You can hear all sorts of sounds. You can hear bugs eating with a stethoscope. You can hear the wind rustling. You can hear the leaves. You can hear, as I said, the fluid coursing through the trees. You can also even hear mice down at the base of a tree doing whatever it is mice do. Obviously up to no good. I'm just saying mice. And then, you can hear all sorts of random things that a forest or a wooded area or even grasslands have a lot of sound happening.
So it's actually hard to tell if there's another person around or if it's just sounds of the vegetation. Like there may not actually be any fauna around. It might just be the flora that's making the sounds. Like it's sometimes hard to tell if you haven't lived there and you know the difference between like how feet move and the sounds they'll make versus when the wind's skipping around.
Like the fungi are constantly growing. And they're growing often under the surface of the forest floor, under the dirt and the soil. But they are growing and they're therefore moving things because of the nature of like fungi growing, expanding. They keep unsettling all the humus around it as it grows bigger and bigger, but it's slow. And it's hard for us to hear without aids because our heartbeats and our lymphatic fluid and everything moving around in our body are actually surprisingly loud. We just drown out that sound. We sort of ignore it, but it is there. Also, our breathing. You would not believe how loud our breathing is. It is loud, y'all. Most animals can hear us coming for quite a while. So Dahl asked about the silence of the forest in winter, which again, I'd say I've never known a forest to be truly silent in the winter. I mean, I definitely you can hear wind. I agree with Tom. Things are drier and more brittle. The wind tends to knock limbs around and they'll creak on occasion. Also, ice forms on a lot of plants because they're still alive, so they have a little bit of heat. And that means that the snow, if there is snow, is sort of melting and then refreezing at night when plants tend to go far more dormant. And then, so the ice is also making sounds as, like, for instance, a leaf slowly moves during the day. So the reason a leaf's going to move is first what happens is the sun comes up and plants that weather the winter, the fluid comes up into the top of the plant with the sun, even in the winter. It's just going to happen slower. And that pushes the leaves from drooping to, usually being at about a horizontal or approximate horizontal stance because it's easier to gain more sunlight because photosynthesis still happens in winter. It just happens slower. And also that fluid is been in the dirt. Most dirt ground is going to be somewhat warmer than the air, usually by 20 to 60 degrees. And so that fluid that's being forced up into the top of the plant in order to help photosynthesis process and then to bring that process down into the roots, it is the temperature of the ground, and that can cause a certain amount of the snow or ice to melt. So you're going to have a dripping, and you're also going to have, when ice thaws, it makes a little creaking sound. And if you wonder what that sounds like, I recommend that you take, this is actually, again, something I did as a child with a stethoscope, but you take a glass jar, like a jelly jar, and you put a couple ice cubes in there and just enough water to cover the ice cubes. So not enough where they really float. And I'd stick the stethoscope to it and just sit there in the kitchen and wait. And within about, 2 to 4 minutes, you hear a creaking sound. And that is the sound of ice warming up from the inside out. It is a groan, actually. And so on a small level, that is happening on any of the plants where ice has formed, is they're groaning a little bit. It's the ice warming up in the sun. Yeah.
But also, while we don't hear the individual sounds without a hearing aid, we do kind of hear the, not consensus, but the total amount of sound
so
and vibrations.
Yeah, like as Spence says, around here there's still animals even when the snow is deep in the trees, is knee deep. Even in the wintertime, you're going to have little animals like mice and even rabbits sometimes that are chewing on things. And while
woodpeckers all year round.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. Woodpecker. But there's various things chewing stuff in the wintertime, particularly in the morning. They chew more often in the morning.
Yeah.
They're going to be chewing out of their little stash of food. And then in the midday is when they go out looking for forage for more food. And then they go to sleep kind of early, like usually by 4 p.m. They go to rest. No, I would think because the swamp, proper haunted. Well, yeah.
Is there any other kind of swamp?
Yeah. So, there are always sounds, and there are and you would be able to. I have gotten quiet again with a stethoscope in the woods, sitting down, just waiting, and actually eventually heard the chewing of a mouse and stuck my stethoscope to that tree. That's where it was. And then stuck my hand to it and realized I could actually feel that mouse chewing on something in its little burrow beneath the tree in between its roots. It's just to be aware of it, of what is happening. There's a lot of life all throughout the world in nature. Heck, to be honest, there's a lot of life even in man-made, complexes such as cities. I mean, there's rats, as well as mice and roaches. So many species of roaches. Did you know that there is one species of roach that specializes in eating the plastic coating around TV wires? That is what it lives on. And if it's forced to, it will eat the glue out of that cardboard boxes are held together with.
Corrugated cardboard.
Corrugated cardboard boxes. Thank you. There is a specific species of roach that has specialized into this. I wish I were kidding, and I am not. So there is life everywhere in this world. Here on the prairie, there are a few hours before dawn when things are very quiet and even the birds and animals are silent. It is rare because the wind is almost always moving. Yeah. So yeah, there is always sound. There is often touch. Things are always vibrating, whether we're talking the city or out in nature, out in various ecosystems. There's always living things out there.
And sometimes just think about how would you describe the vibe? Like the humidity level and the sense of, expansiveness or closed in that you feel can also really give a good sense.
So that is, the big exercise for today's episode is to really work on describing settings and taking any of the settings in any of the movies recommended today or any other movie. Hello, Anne. I mean, yes. Having said that, I've listened to monarch butterflies munching on plants. Isn't it so cool? Did you know that different caterpillars sound different when they're munching on different plants? Like, and I don't mean just, oh, it goes from crunch crunch to squeaky squeaky. No. Like they sound like absolutely different creatures.
They have different ideas of how to eat.
So again, and most of the time, this is one of the things I love about YouTube. Most of the time, somebody has made a video on YouTube with amplified sound, so you don't have to go out in nature with a stethoscope like I did as a child. Because that was how my father used to keep me busy when I was a kid, and he was supposed to, take care of me so mom could have some time off. And he would just go, like, hand me a stethoscope and go, he's like, I'm gonna sit in the car, go out into those woods right there off the side of the road, and go tell me everything you can hear. But you have to be out there for at least 5 minutes before you come back and tell me what you heard. And that was, what, honestly, I kind of liked it. He's like, go stick the stethoscope to grass. What do you hear? I'm like, I just hear, and I come back, I just hear the rustle of the grass. Okay, go stick it to that tree right there. No, that tree. Stick it to that tree and be really quiet for 5 minutes. He was honestly just trying to get me to leave him alone so he could read an article. But anyway, it's super fun to stick a stethoscope to a lot of different things and hear it. Yes, Maggie says I can tell bees and bumblebees and wasps all sound very different. Even different types of flies sound different. Yeah. What is it? Sweat bees sound so different from bumblebees or carpenter bees. There are so many kinds of bees in our area. Yes, butterflies will drink tears and blood. Butterflies are pretty psychopathic. Yeah. So, like, there are always ways to describe how things sound. And all of those things, as well as the temperature, like humidity or dryness in the air, and just all of these things will help aid in how a room or a setting feels when you walk into it.
I mean, one thing that's often not used enough, I think, but to really help you pull your reader and audience in is people don't think about it and they don't realize it, but you can tell time of day by the sounds of the outside. Mm-hmm. Whether you're in a natural setting or in a city, mm-hmm. things sound very different at 7 a.m. versus 9 a.m, mid-morning versus late morning and noontime. And then evening, they've all got their own sounds. Bees mm-hmm. really come out more in the morning. And the hummingbirds.
Carpenter bees. Cursed carpenter bees.
And hummingbirds come out mid-morning to late morning. And like you can even have them comment on, haven't even gone outdoors, but obviously it's mid-morning. I hear the hummingbirds. They're busy today. Or the bees or whatever, but you can kind of bring that into your story of them noticing this time of day stuff. Or, it must be getting, the sun's probably going to start setting soon if, the possums are coming out.
You, like, seriously, if you're setting a story in North America, go look up ASMR of possums walking around. They sound so different from how most things sound when they walk. Possums sound like they have always been exhausted by the world. They make this little thud thud, like they fat little things. They're not really that fat, but they kind of move like they've always got arthritis. And they also grunt and groan like, oh, arthritis. They move, they make these funny little sounds. So if you can fit a possum in, you should definitely like try describing the movement and sounds and the look of a possum for a paragraph or 2 or 3 sentences. Because they lumber. Like, how does this rodent lumber? How and why does a rodent lumber? Please explain. Yeah, they always sound like they really need antidepressants, and yet, like someone who really needs antidepressants, they will also turn on you and scream at you at the drop of a hat. It is amazing.
And then you can have the mistake of mistaking a possum for a badger.
Oh, North American badgers will kill a person. They're so dangerous. They're so fierce. And they definitely want everything in your trash.
Like, you'd be better off with, a bear.
You would be better off. You can kind of convince a bear to go away, especially if you throw a donut in a direction. But a badger is like, no, I came here to go through your trash and also kill a man. Come on now. I'm all out of trash.
And also, they are walking carpets. They are very thick walking carpets. They're surprisingly wide.
The way when they're going through your trash, so they'll get up on their hind legs, right? So that their front paws can like dig through the trash. And then as they move around, they don't actually move their legs. They'll just kind of move side to side because I guess their hips can pivot a bit. But what you'll see behind them, because I've sat in a car and watched this of like, he going through my trash, but I am not even going to honk at him because I don't want him to tear this car apart. But what you see in the street light is that they have very thick hides and very lush, thick fur, but it moves in such a way that you see how thick that fur is, but it's not so thick you can't see it kind of move as they pivot around. Yeah, honey badgers don't care. No, a 22 just makes them angry. A 22 wouldn't, if it drew blood, it would just make it like, it would have bloodlust then. It would be like, oh, you got some of mine, so I'm taking all of yours. Yes, I agree. I'm very afraid of badgers. See what happened was I was actually in, with my then husband. We were in his pickup truck and, it was a full-size pickup. And we drove up. It was after midnight. We drove up to the house, and I thought there was a dog going through our trash. So I was about to get out and yell at it. Because usually that's all you have to do to get the dog to go away. And at the very last minute, I opened the door, and the badger turned its head since it heard the door open. And I realized it was a badger and not a dirty golden retriever. And I immediately closed the door and locked the doors and was like, oh no, it's a badger. And my ex-husband was like, because if you ever play D&D, you know that it's one of the very few normal non-magical animals that can easily kill a man. It is definitely who originally drew up D&D was very familiar with how deadly badgers are. So yeah, we just sat there and watched it go through the trash and debated, should we honk the horn? I'm like, no, it'll tear apart the truck. No, you and I have played D&D enough to know this is not worth dying for or destroying the truck. It'll eat through a tire. And he's like, this was when the internet was still young. So we didn't have phones that we could look up the internet and can a badger eat a tire? So we instead sat there and debated because the badger was like, oh, you closed your door? Then that's fine. And went back to chewing through the garbage. And we're like, what's in the garbage? How long is it going to be there? Because we really wanted to go home into the house, but there was no way we were going to risk taking a run from the car to the front door, get the front door unlocked, and both of us get in before a rampaging badger, since we're talking about what, less than 20 feet from where the badger was at the trash to the front door. Maggie says, I put a 38 round through a badger trying to get in the barn, and it snarled at me until I shot in the neck. Yeah, you do not mess with badgers, people. They are for real. And it had the fattest butt. It had like a Donald Duck fat butt. It was fantastic. It was a very pretty badger. I was like, this was the biggest badger I'd ever seen in a city. Usually badgers I've seen in the city are like literally this big. Like the size of a miniature dachshund. They're very small. This thing was the great granddaddy of badgers. It was the size of a fat golden retriever. Do you know how big golden retriever? It was a fat golden retriever. It was that big. It was quite big. And I was just like, no, that one will definitely chew the tire off this truck. We do not need to deal with that. No, just let him have all the trash. Thankfully, it turned out I hadn't thrown out the trash from the kitchen. And that's why he was still looking. He could smell food, just like residue in the trash can. But he couldn't find food because the kitchen trash was not in that particular round of the trash can. And that was why he was still going through it, he was absolutely certain he could find food. And eventually he ended up with like one sad Lay's potato chip wrapper. He's trying to lick it out. He was very disappointed. And he definitely grunted at us like, I'm disappointed in you, before he finally left. We just sat in the truck. We sat in the truck for about 25 minutes waiting for him to be done before we got in the house. And then we waited till he'd walk down the street a while just to make sure, because you do not mess with badgers. Yep.
It's the angriest carpet you've ever seen.
Yes, little badgers are the angriest carpet you will ever see on four legs. I agree. I'm so glad that we could share this in this descriptive experience. I hope you have all enjoyed Badger Talk. And before that, Possum Talk.
Yeah, if you ever need to add in some, environmental stuff, you can always ask us. Because of where we've lived, we can give you a good sense of all the different ones of versus cities. Have them comment, as we've seen, every time Zara is on the show, New York stereotypes are true. Every hour, there will be the sound of cop cars going by in New York.
Mm-hmm. How about the javelina? Remember how I would sit where our sister used to live outside of Phoenix? There, it wasn't a backyard. It was, what was that? It was like a run for these peccaries.
Yeah.
These tiny little pig creatures. They weren't that tiny because it had a mommy. And pretty much they were out there every morning between like 7 a.m. and 11 a.m. And then nobody was feeding them. I checked. Nobody was feeding them. This is just where they like to go in the mornings. I think because there were several plants they like to eat from. So I would set my alarm to go off a couple hours earlier so I could just make coffee. And I would literally sit with the sliding glass door the curtains open, because I am not about to open that door. And I would just sit and watch the peccaries, because they called them javelinas back then, but I know they're now peccaries. Just sit and watch the peccary mother with all her little babies go foraging around on the plants that they could get to along the fence. And they have constant conversations, y'all. They have nuanced conversations with each other, and they are not always arguing. Sometimes they sing to each other. Did you know that about peccaries? Because, as I said, I would sit there sometimes with Luna, the coffee bunny. Because, yes, I'm a little bit of a psychopath, and I wanted to see how Luna would react. Luna at first was like, have you lost your mind? And by the third day was like, I see that, you've invented this thing called glass. That's cool. So, because they would literally come and investigate me, especially the babies, every day, because I would just sit on the floor, on the carpeted floor, in front of the sliding glass doors with the curtains opened wide, and just drink coffee and watch them. And they would come and sniff around. Do you know how tempting it was to not leave them treats? Just so they would but I didn't have to, since what I, however, would do is in the afternoons, I would go to, they were eating berries off of some bush that was jutting up against the cyclone fencing of the apartment complex. And I would go and I would pick some from the higher bushes, and then I would like lay them all around on the ground right in front of the bushes, so that the next morning I would have something to match. They sing to each other. Particularly when they find like a little pile of berries, the little babies will sing to each other to let them know to come over. And I mean, like, even Luna noticed and was like, "Are they singing?" And Luna started listening to their little songs. Not eating, singing, but like, "Come, I have found a little pile of berries." So, like, and I'm sure there's ASMR videos people have made of all these animals on YouTube. So think about including more nature descriptions. And when I say nature, I do include cityscape descriptions. Because let me tell you, I promise you, in the walls of every apartment in a metropolitan area, there are roaches and rodents chewing all the dang time. Rodents have to chew, or their teeth will grow into their brain. So they have to chew or they will die. So think about that. Inside of a city, there's always animals chewing. Always. And people also don't realize how much roaches chew. Roaches chew a lot. Anytime a roach is curious, their mandibles start going, or whatever these are. I don't know. I didn't really look that up. Yeah. Yeah, they'll destroy a garden. I know someone who rolled up a badger baling hay, and and they didn't know what they did. I refused to get out of the truck. I told them to cut the twine on the back of the round bale and leave. But those idiots walked around to check it, and the badger tried to eat one of them while the other two climbed a bale to get away. I drove the truck and rescued them, and then we headed to the ER. The doctor asked what happened, so I told him. He looked at the boys and asked if they... My boss couldn't finish baling that field or pick up those bales for a week because the badger would chase anyone who came. Yes. Oh, I didn't know you had to have a permit to shoot a badger in Kansas. I mean, not that, like, as I said, my gun was in the house when we saw the badger. I mean, it was loaded with rock salt. Yeah, the origin story for Tremors. Welcome to Joe's apartment. It's our apartment too. Yes.
I still like that movie.
He does. He talks about it fairly often. But like, keep in mind, like, even in houses, most houses are going to have, even if you never see a roach, there's going to be roaches. Like, I don't mean to ruin your life, but if you've ever had water damage in a house, I promise you there's insects. Because water softens wood, and most insects deal with decay. That's what...
Especially beetles. Yes. Beetles are noted because they speciated to digest cellulose, like one of the few animals.
Well, also, termites. So you're going to have, if you've ever had water damage, if you've ever had roof damage and, couldn't get it fixed like literally the next day, likely there's water damage then. And that means that likely there is some wood decay, which means there's insects. Yeah, you can tell the time of day by the birds. Usually I can tell here when it's 7 a.m. because there's a particular small owl in the area that likes to mention it's the morning. It only hoots around 7 a.m. It also does not understand daylight savings. I'm saying that. Best part of living where I live, too little humidity for them to survive if you keep a clean house. So, like, these are things to think about when you are describing things. So if you are describing something that you're trying to make creepy or horrific, You know, there's always describing the chewing of roaches and or rodents,
And
whether we're
snails.
talking and snails or slugs. If you have any of those big hostas or elephant ear plants, you've got a slug problem. Or snails. Because they need it to lay their little eggs. So any of those big leaf plants, or like, was it Easter lilies? Any of those big leafed plants like that do like kind of bush in the ground, then you've got slugs or snails, or both. Although usually it's only one or the other, because apparently slugs and snails do not get along harmoniously since they compete for the same breeding ground. And so one will kill off the other. So it's something to think about when you're describing the things, like even in a backyard. Oh dear. No snails, but the big leaf plants dry out quickly here. Yeah.
Yeah, it helps that you have that wind and the low humidity.
Mm-hmm. Because they'll dry out in between the leaves, like at the base. So all of these are descriptive. Really paint a picture. As I said, the exercise is to describe a setting and to get out your thesaurus and use every synonym you can figure to describe everything possible about your setting. Really go buck wild. Just go for it. Describe everything possible. Even if you think that you're describing the same thing multiple times, don't worry about it, because you're doing zero draft. You're just describing a setting. And what we specifically talked about was what was in Ella, since you do see all three settings pretty well. Or you could do in full bloom, or you could do granny, or you could do your own desire setting, like your room or your backyard or something. But describe a setting, use all the words, all the synonyms, make your thesaurus earn its money. Leave it for 3 or more days. Leave it alone. Do not touch it. Do not reread it. When you've forgotten what you wrote, go back and then edit like the cruelest editor possible. Take out anything that is not necessary. Take out anything that is boring or uninteresting, or it turns out you don't like that word.
No, don't forget the cruelest part, because you're in journalism.
Oh, that's right. You are literally, these are the rules of journalism. You are only allowed 2 words that end in ly for your entire descriptive setting during your editing process. You can use all the ly words, the words ending in ly, that you want while you are writing it out. You may use every single adverb known to man. I don't care. But in the editing process, you may only have 2 standing. Only 2 words ending in ly left. Why? Because my editor only let me have 1. I am being generous and letting you have 2. I know, it's terrible and it's not fair. Do it.
In part because adverbs are definitely notoriously part of telling instead of showing.
Mm-hmm. Where adverbs tell you how something is rather than making you show how it is. Anyway, it's an exercise. This is not like how you should live your life or write, okay? We're just trying an exercise. This is not a lifestyle. Don't worry. I have no criticism for all the LYs, in your alpha or beta text, but like for this exercise, this is the exercise. You're going to break out your thesaurus. Get your best one.
Just like when you're learning to cook, sometimes one of the best exercises is, all right, you think it's cooked. Now cook it 50% longer. See what it's like. Know what happens to it at the extreme. See how long can you bake a cake or cornbread or something till it actually starts to burn. How much time is that versus when you think it's done and it's ready to go?
Mm-hmm.
And now what's the difference in quality between them? It gives you ideas, but it also lets you know, gives you a better sense of how to utilize all these tools.
Mm-hmm. So that is like that is something, that is the exercise I'm proposing. The big exercise I'm proposing this week is try this out. Take any setting at all. A setting you're familiar with, a setting you're not familiar with, a setting from any of today's short films, whatever you want. And describe it and make your thesaurus earn its money. Every possible synonym you could possibly find for every kind of word you want to use. Get obnoxious. Please be obnoxious in this Sarah draft. Use all the words. Get as purple as humanly possible. So purple it goes black. Okay? Just so purple. So purple, it's ready to start a party. I don't know. Spence says, oh, I'm a super evil editor. You're not allowed to keep any in the first edit. Maybe you can give some back later if it walked quickly. Works better than power walk. As I said, this is the exercise. Maggie says, how is he snorted derisively? Less showing that he gave a derisive snort. Neither. He snorted. He snorted and sneered at the same time. Yeah. Del says, I'm going through my book again because I will self-publish this. So yeah, description exercises all the way. So this is the exercise. You're going to take a setting of your choice, whatever you want to do. So something you have to be willing to think about for a while. And you are going to write between 500 and 5,000 words. It's your choice. If it's 498, you have to add 2 more words. Them's the rules. Yes, I'm putting my teacher hat on. 500 to 5,000 words, describe a setting. So make that thesaurus pay. And then you have to leave it till you forgot what you wrote and you forgot all the synonyms. Like you're like, I think I remember 3. So you're going to give it at least 3 days. And then you are going to go through and you're going to edit anything that just seems ridiculous or you just don't like those words. You're just going to edit it down and you're going to rewrite it with all the edits, that you've removed. And you're going to read through it out loud to yourself and see what you think of it. That's literally all it is. That's all it is. This is what I used to do with my students. This is among the exercises I found that really accelerated their writing craft quickly. And I was teaching 10-year-olds, so this was kind of impressive. Yeah, you can do it tomorrow. You can do it like your one little day to yourself, your self-care Saturday, whatever you want to do when you do this exercise. But this is the exercise for this week. Have at it.
Here's the question. Here's the question. How many days does an Amazon order have to take before when it's delivered, you forgot what you ordered? 2 days and I don't remember what I ordered.
Fair. That's fair.
So just think about that. Like, how many days can it be between an order and a delivery that you're like, wait, what did I order and why?
Yep. I know. It's this concept. It's brand new. It's in the 21st century. There you go. However long it takes you to entirely forget, wait, I ordered something from Amazon? And you've got the package. You're literally holding the package. You still can't remember what's in it. How long does that take? Everybody knows this one. Or most people know it. For me, it's 4 days. 4 days, and I'm like, I don't. Something's in here. Did I order? Did Tom order? Transient insomniac. Somniatic. Yeah. So okay. So that's it. That's the exercise. Let's talk about next week. On the 21st. It's going to be the Muppet storytelling style episode. Oh my God, we're going to talk about Muppets. Specifically, Jerry Jewell, the writer, and his supreme influence over the Muppet storytelling style. And in many ways, he and Jim Henson together set the Muppet storytelling style. But really, when it came to the writing side, it was more of Jerry Jewell. So we're going to talk about the Muppet storytelling style with a specific view of Jerry Jewell's influence on Muppet Shows. So I think like through the mid to late 90s was,
As I say, I think Muppet Treasure Island may have been the last.
and even then, like from my research, he really apparently wasn't actually that involved with it. That's a whole nother matter. I'll tell you about that afterwards. But anyway. So if you are not going to Pizza Demon's birthday party, hopefully we will see you back here on March the 21st. The stories that we will be talking about specifically include the Muppet Movie, Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas, the Muppet Show, all 5 seasons. But like, we're just going to talk about certain skits in there. The Great Muppet Caper, Muppet Family Christmas, Muppet Christmas Carol, and yes, we will be talking about Treasure Island. It is a weird hot mess.
And the one of the things in particular you notice is the relationship between Kermit and Miss Piggy is very different when Jerry Jewell is running things versus when other writers approach. Hence what happened with Muppets in the mid 2010s. And, a writer got brought in after the first half of the season because it was crashing so hard. Because, no, we've got so much things set up that Kermit loves Miss Piggy. Miss Piggy loves Kermit. They just don't always express it very well.
We actually see some interesting interactions between Muppet and Miss Piggy that specifically sort of set the tone with the Muppet Movie, where, supposedly they're making up this mythology of how Miss Piggy and Kermit met. And it's kind of interesting because we see their interplay and also how they work better as friends than romantically, and how they keep trying to get it to work. But are they willing to make the sacrifices necessary to get this relationship to work? A tale as old as time. So yeah, we are going to be talking about all of that. We're going to look at Jerry Jewell's influence on the Muppets. And we're going to talk about what everybody as writers can really take away from the wisdom of Jerry Jewell. Because let's be perfectly honest about one thing. Jerry Jewell made the Muppets palatable to a general audience. They were not palatable to a general audience before. That was actually the Muppet problem. That was the Muppet problem in the late 50s, early 60s and on, was they worked as a late night act. They did not work for general audiences. That is where Jerry Jewell came in, was to help make the Muppets palatable to primetime audience. So that is what we are going to look at, is how Jerry Jewell made the Muppets palatable to general audiences, and not even specifically family audiences, all audiences. So I think that's something that we as writers could really, benefit from studying. Well, how did he do it? So if we want to do it, we know what to do. And if we don't want to do it, we know what not to do, right?
It's definitely great use for compare and contrast.
Mm-hmm. So we hope we will see you the next time on Monday. And if you'd like to be more a part of our process, Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. I don't know what the daylight savings, what it is. What is it? 2 a.m. Central European time. On Twitch, on Glory Writes the Blues, we will be going over our process of getting ready for Monday's show. So if you can, we'd love for you to join us. Also on Twitch on Thursdays at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. We do Coffee Bunny Cafe. This week it'll be on Cat Leo Writing Twitch stream. And then on Saturdays at 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, on my Twitch stream, we do Self-Care Saturday, where, why yes, we do tend to do a facial mask. And we, chit-chat. We also do sprints. And we have a good time for like 3 hours. It's nice. We'd love for you to join us. The many incarnations of Muppet Mania. Yes. So thank you all so much for joining us. And we will see y'all when we see you. Bye-bye. Mwah.
See you in the Discord.